35% endings, but 67% of all text. How does that even work? I don't know. Hello everyone, it's me again, we're playing more Kamaitachi no Yoru. Hello again, Otome. Let's prepare some juice to watch Dr. Midori today. Alright, but you're not allowed to drink it unless someone redeems a hydrate, that's the rules. How's your day been? I don't know. It happened. Anyway, last time I noticed this as an incredibly obvious branching point. So that's where we're gonna start. Now last time we streamed this game, we said it was probably a ghost. And then it was a ghost. By the time someone redeems a hydrate, it won't be cold anymore. You could fix that very easily on your own, don't you know? So that was how it worked last time. And what happens if we say, maybe there's a spy in the lodge? Oh, red spies in the lodge. We need to protect the briefcase. For a moment, Mario's eyes flashed. Don't do that. Or had that just been a trick of the light? Regardless, Mario's expression quickly returned to its usual self. When in doubt, just kind of awkwardly stammer and walk off. Usually works for me. Night's still young, I thought. Well, downstairs in the lounge, some sofas were arranged around the table. I decided to sit there. And then there's the ladies. Let's try to stay on theme, why don't we? Mr. Yakuza looking fella. Curious. Alright, new content. Hey, I'm a genius. We managed to accomplish the thing. The thing being new content. The girl trembled and held out a scrap of paper to Kobayashi. From where I stood, I could see something written on it in red marker. The Kamaitachi comes tonight. Alright, here's the red spy in the base. You think I'm just gonna tell you that? If I told you, then I'd have to kill you. And that would just mess with everything. You can't have a detective be the culprit, that's so overdone. Anyway, the Kamaitachi comes at midnight. But the gun hamster arrives when it ran. I don't know, I'm not a spy. Hey, they did the thing where they say the title of the video game in the video game. I glanced over at Mari. She was staring at the scrap of paper. her face pale.
マリ、どうしたんだよ。
She jumped slightly, then shook her head.
なんでもないの。
It's nothing. Certainly didn't seem like nothing. I could tell that much just by looking at her bloodless face. But she didn't have any blood in her face. Why did it just start to decay and fall off? I think I've noticed a contradiction. We should probably... If we push, we can at least get more info.
なんでもないわけないだろう。マリ、顔色良くないよ。
I persisted.
本当になんでもないのよ。
It can't be nothing. You've got the little scratches on your nose that somehow communicate that you're surprised.
でも、
Demo...
スキー張り切りすぎたのね。ちょっと疲れてるのよ。
Okay, now we know she's lying. Mary never sleeps. Or gets tired. She forced herself to smile. It was probably best to leave it at that. After all, maybe the word Kamaitachi brought up unpleasant memories for her. Everyone tended to have one or two things like that. It'd be inconsiderate of me to dig any deeper. Still, I was a little concerned. What might Mari's bad memories of this Kamaitachi be? Wait. Okay. So, how long do I have to wait? Is it like 20 seconds, a minute? 10 minutes? Come on, I need some sort of time frame here. I've got a lot of other projects working. The statute of limitations on the Kamai family murder. Yes, that's a real thing that happened. Don't ask questions. He's in like a week. Come on, man. Alright, you know what? Fine, I don't gotta listen to you. The hell say Kamaitachi in the first place? And what the hell does genuflect even mean, anyway? I tilted my head in contemplation. Alright, now I remembered. That's convenient. I was pretty sure it was something they used to serve us for lunch back in grade school. So maybe Mari refused to eat her Kamaitachi and got chewed out by her teacher. Memories came flooding back to me. I mean, yeah, I wouldn't eat a meal that included sick blades either. There are way more efficient ways of self-harm.
好き嫌いは良くないよ。
I gently teased Mari. The look on her face made it clear she had no idea what I was talking about. Wah, 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 wah. So it wasn't food then. Hmm. Ah, now I remembered. I was pretty sure it was a natural phenomenon. A whirlwind spawned by a pocket of low pressure could open cuts on a person's body. Back in the day, folks used to say it was the work of something known as a Kamaitachi, or more literally, a sickle weasel. But what bad memories could she possibly have of the Kamaitachi? Had she gotten cut by one at some point? Someday I'm gonna have to downsize that hand. Someday, but not today. 'Cause that would take effort.
いそうに痛かったろ。
Mari was still looking at me like I was crazy. Still not the right Kamaitachi? The hell could it be then? I don't know. I was curious, sure, but curiosity wasn't getting me anywhere. Enough. I was tired of trying to figure it out. I just asked her directly. Man, who would have thought?
マリにとってのかまいたちの嫌な思い出って何？
かまいたちの嫌な思い出？何よそれ。そんなものないわよ。さっきから何をわけのわからないことばかり。
Man, Mari, you're disappointing me. Most culprits are better liars than this, of all things. Come on. Was that so?
どういう意味なんでしょうかね。
Kobayashi mumbled this to no one in particular.
わからないけど、なんか気持ち悪いよね。
Keiko looked at her two friends, and they nodded in agreement.
誰かのいたずらか、そうでないとしたら。
Either someone's playing a prank, or someone's not playing a prank. Truly the greatest detective who ever lived.
そうでないとしたら。
When I asked Kobayashi to finish his thoughts, he just looked at me. Alright, you wanna play a staring contest? I can do that, you smug prick. Come on, blink. Blink, damn you. Blink! Dang it.
部屋を間違えたんじゃないかな。
Now that's a weird thing for you to have assumed.
部屋を？
うん。誰か別の人に対するメッセージなのかもしれない。
別の人？
隣の部屋か向かいか、それはわからないが、その人ならこの意味がわかるのかもしれない。まあ何にしろ気にしなくてもいいんじゃないですか？
That seems like a bit of a leap. Kobayashi looked at the girls, and shrugged. If I hadn't seen that bloodless look on Mari's face, I could have dismissed the whole thing just as easily. Yet. I glanced at Mari, but she turned away as if nothing had happened.
私ちょっと用事思い出したわ。部屋に行ってくるから、トールは談話室にでもいてよ。
Good dog.
うん。
Without even waiting for me to answer, Mari raced upstairs like the wind and disappeared. Fortunately, no one else had noticed her unusual reaction. As I casually slipped away from the front desk, hoping to follow Mari, Kobayashi approached me.
トール君、何か飲まないか？コーヒーか紅茶か、なんならビールでも。
ええ。
Damn. His politeness judo was too strong. I can't deny him without looking like kind of a dick. Truly a powerful technique. I thought it seemed strange to refuse, so I nodded.
あなた方もどうですか？サービスにいたしますよ。
Savisu. Savisu. Kobayashi directed this at the girls. They looked at each other and nodded their heads before replying.
はーい。いただきます。
Okay. It seemed like they'd already forgotten about the suspicious notes. But not me. Mind like a steel trap over here. I'm still worried by Mari's reaction. I sat on the lounge sofa and thought about the problem of the note. Who could have left it? And who was it intended for? For that matter, who else was staying near the girl's room? is to start by asking the girls themselves. I looked at each of them in turn. Then... Aki is the one who projects the most baseline competence. But she's also the one who talks the least. Kaneko is the most outgoing, but seems the least likely to actually stay on topic. Keiko doesn't seem like anything. I don't have any read on her at all. Trust any of them. Well, that's not an option, Otome. What do you want from me? What do you offer a secret fourth option? There, I clicked it. There's nothing there. The alphabet only goes up to C, don't you know? I know, I'm gonna talk to Aki. I decided to ask Aki.
ねえ、君たちの部屋の近くって誰が泊まってるかわかる？
私たちの近く？確か向かいが彼女じゃなかったかしら。マリちゃんって言ったっけ？出入りするのを見たから。
Mari was in the room across the hall from them. Hearing that only increased my anxiety. Mari could very well have been the intended recipient of that note. If so, it wouldn't be surprising if she understood the real meaning behind it. See, I told you she was the correct answer. I always trust a woman with glasses that just kind of arbitrarily gets stopped being drawn at something because they'd cover her eyes. You know me, I say that all the time.
隣はどうですか？
I pulled myself together and asked another question.
隣？さあ。
I wasn't making much progress. I decided to wait for Kobayashi to return from the back of the building. After all, the owner would probably be the best person to ask this sort of thing. Eventually, he and his wife Kyoko returned carrying trays.
あの。
But just as I was about to call out to them, Mari came back down the stairs. In the end, I hadn't managed to learn anything. Mari sat down next to me with a smile on her face, as if nothing had happened.
マリちゃんもお茶飲むでしょ？
Mari smiled and nodded. She was back to being the same old Mari again. Tune in next time, same Mari time, same Mari channel. What I'd seen earlier, it must have been my imagination. Or maybe she'd just been in a bad mood. In any case, the mysterious note had nothing to do with Mari. I forced myself to believe that. As then I saw the flicker of headlights through the falling snow outside.
あれ？今頃誰か来たのかな？
Hearing that, Kobayashi joined me in looking out the window.
多分三木本とかいう人だろう。遅れるって連絡があったから。
There's the guy. I heard a car come to a stop out behind the lodge. A few moments later, a large man staggered in through the front door, the blizzard at his back.
助かった。いらっしゃいませ。三木本様でいらっしゃいますか？
Kobayashi called out to the newcomer.
そうですそうです。いや、えらい目に遭いました。
Seriously, like, how does this bit over here work? Like, your mustache is growing out over the area you already have facial hair on. It looks so bad. How did you expect to fool anyone with this? Since Mikimoto had driven to the lodge, he'd only had to walk the short distance from the lot to the front door. But even so, his head and shoulders were piled high with snow. I mean, it worked. Did it, though? Did it really? I mean, you questioned it. I questioned it. Toto questioned it on the only route where it mattered. He took a moment to brush it off, then removed his shoes and headed to the front desk.
夕食はあいにく終わったんですが、よろしければおにぎりか何か用意いたしましょうか。
Boy, I love jelly filled.
おにぎり？そりゃありがたい。飢え死にしそうだったところなんです。
そうですか。じゃあ着替えられたら食堂かそこの談話室にいらしてください。
Mikimoto finished signing himself in, then trundled up the stairs with an enormous ski bag.
スキーしそうなタイプじゃないわね。雪山登山でもするのかしら。
He whispered this to me.
そうだね。
Already casting suspicion on the outsider, is it? I see how it is. Miss Spy? He certainly looked the part of a mountain man with a strapping frame and a big bushy beard. I glanced over at the three girls and saw they were all gazing intently up at the stairs. However, when they noticed me looking, they averted their eyes and went back to talking about something else.
ねえねえ、昨日のあれ見た？空から降る1億の鐘。
I hadn't seen it, but I knew it was a popular cash giveaway show. Oh, I thought it was just an adaptation of the end of Yakuza 1.
見た見た、すごいわよね。富士山の上空1万メートルから1億円をばらまいたなんて。来週はピラミッドの上空でばらまくそうよ。テレビ局、資金持つのかしら。
I mean, if you drop it over the pyramids, the only people who are gonna get it are tomb raiders and the pharaoh. The pharaoh's already dead, what's he gonna do with it? You can't even put it inside his coffin. Because, you know, he's dead. What the hell kind of show was this, anyway?
紅茶が入りましたよ。
Coco placed cups in front of each of us, and filled them with fresh tea that smelled faintly of apples. Well, bone apple tea. The part-timers, Toshio and Midori, seemed to pick up the scent and came wandering over to the dining room.
あなたたちもどう？
They both nodded eagerly, as if they'd only been waiting for her to ask. Mikimoto came back downstairs, and at precisely the same moment, Kobayashi emerged, bearing some rice balls. The lounge was suddenly filled with people and their lively chatter.
1億円売ってこないかな。
If they'll drop 100 million yen in Grand Central Station, in Tokyo Tower, in the toilet behind the Denny's on the corner of Peachtree and 45th. Come on, don't leave me in suspense here. I gots to know.
だからパラレルの時はね、山側の足を。
美味しいお米ですね。これは一体どこの？
For the ground, presumably. And so forth. You get the idea. The Kobayashis and their employees, Toshio and Midori, all seemed like genuinely nice people. As for me, I was able to just relax and spend some quality time with Mari. If I knew it was already 10 o'clock at night. I was exhausted and I had a long day ahead of me tomorrow. Everyone seemed to be thinking much the same thing, for as Mari and I stood up, the impromptu gathering began to wind down.
おやすみなさい。明日 パラレル教えてくださいね。
Parallel skiing is when you ski at a fourth dimensional angle and arrive at a parallel universe. And lets you get all the way down to the bottom of the slope in only half an A press.
ゆっくり休んでください。
Good night, chat. Sleep well. The group walked up the stairs en masse, then headed for their respective rooms. Mari rushed to do likewise. I wondered if I should invite her to my room. If I didn't act fast, her door would close, and that would be that. Jokes and you will stay awake on all night. No, you won't. That's my gimmick. We can't overlap. The writers won't allow it. Deliberation. If I'm reading the scenario correctly, then Mari is probably the intended recipient of that letter, which, given what we know, or at least know something about that letter, given that her uncle also really obviously made clumsy, overly knowledgeable attempts to deflect, that might mean that she is the, or at least a spy, or someone who knows about it, given the theme of this branch. The question is, does that mean that interfering with her would be an unnecessary risk? Or would it be good? Would Mari just slit our throats and hope no one accuses her of it, if it meant it would stop interfering with her mission? I don't know. Hey, if I'm right, at least we'll learn.
マリ待てよ。
I called out to her from behind.
何？
I turned with a look of annoyance on her face. It's very windy up here. They should really weatherproof these rooms.
僕の部屋に来ない。
Smooth, seamless.
トールの部屋に？どうして？
She wore poker face.
どうしてってそりゃ話したりゲームをしたり。
つまり特に用があるわけじゃないのね。
I seemed annoyed with me.
そりゃまあそういやそうだけど。
She is deliberately avoiding us on purpose because she has stuff to do. I feel vindicated.
ごめんなさい。ちょっと気分が悪くてそんな気になれないの。おやすみなさい。
Has anyone ever felt over the weather? What would that even mean? Would you have to be out above the atmosphere? Would you have to cast yourself to the deepest depths of outer space? But Mari didn't seem sick at all. Instead, she was acting like something had gotten under her skin. I wonder if it was that note. Did it have something to do with her, after all? When I got back to my room, I took a shower, hoping to wash away my anxieties along with the day's sweat. But it didn't do any good. I tossed and turned in my bed, worrying about Mari. But as I lay there listening to the howling of the wind outside, sleep slowly began to creep over me. Whoa, is that Mikimoto's bed? I mean, I imagine all the rooms look the same. This is like a lodge. Totally tossing to. Okay, you're just having one of your low moments. That's okay. Just leave her be. She'll be back in a minute. I was about to doze off when I heard a knock at my door. Mari? My drowsiness vanished in an instant. Mari had snuck over to my room. I leapt out of bed, ran the door, and threw it open. I knew she was trouble from the moment I saw her. The dames always are. And this one was the absolute worst option. Spun gold down to her hips and legs that went all the way up. I knew as soon as I saw her that I needed a lot of life insurance. And what I had was a coat, a hat, and a gun. Yeah, well, sorry. Sorry, I saw a woman wearing a red dress and I went all the way into film noir for a moment. Why do I suddenly taste smoke? A voluptuous silhouette awaited me, backlit by the hallway lights.
ねえ、飲みましょう。
A figure held a bottle in her hand. I gulped and turned on my room light. It wasn't Mari. By the time I realized this, the woman was already in my room.
渡瀬さん？
かなこって呼んで。
God, one of them is demonstrating initiative separately from the other two. This is revolutionary. As she whispered this in my ear, I caught a whiff of her shampoo and the scent of soap on her freshly washed skin.
どうして？
I was hopelessly confused.
座ってもいい？
Without waiting for an answer, she sat down on the bed where I'd just been sleeping. I didn't know where she'd gotten it, but the bottle in her hand was wine. In her other hand, she held 2 glasses. She offered one to me, and I had little choice but to accept it. And she filled it to the brim with red wine.
素敵な出会いに。
Our glasses clinked together. A lovely rendezvous. And she mean the two of us?
さあ。
So... what? Kana put the bottle on the floor, grabbed my arm and pulled me down next to her on the bed. I could see the curve of her breasts as they disappeared beneath the low-cut neckline of her dress. On one hand, I'd rather not encourage the game to go anywhere in this direction. On the other hand, I don't trust this glass. Even a little. I would like to not take any sleeping pills, because that's obviously what she's here for.
もっと。
別に。
Looked away and drained my glass. Okay, that was worthless.
強いのね。
Thanks, Toru. Thanks for being stupid. Have you never read any book before? I mean, really? She whispered into my ear, her breath fluttering. This couldn't be. Smart to say, are you trying to seduce me?
あのマリってこのこと好きなの？
Right point.
まあ。
でもまだ何もさせてくれないんでしょ？
A blunt way of putting it, but yes.
そんなお高く止まった女なんかさっさと諦めちゃえば？
She looked at me with those luminous eyes of her. It was like staring into a pair of boat lights. I mean, seriously, my retinas were burning horribly. I started to feel a little funny in the head, like I was walking on a cloud. As I looked at her again, I realized she was way hotter than Mari, like not even in the same league. But her eyes are like 10 pixels smaller. That counts for a lot, don't you know? good talk.
しっかりして。トール、しっかりして。
I told you not to drink it, you moron. Yes, it was Mari's voice after all.
マリー、素敵だよ。
バカ、何言ってんの。
It was a short, sharp sound. Pain shot through my cheek. When I cracked my eyes open a sliver, I could vaguely make Mari peering down at me from overhead. What? Why had I fallen asleep?
起きて、お願いだから早く。
There was an urgency to her voice, so I mobilized all my will and opened my eyes. Mari was standing by my bed, her face pale. Little by little, I was beginning to remember what had happened. I sat up and gazed around the room. Couldn't believe what I saw. Yeah, good going, moron. Kanako. She looked like she was sitting on the floor, her back to the wall. But there was a second mouth, opening its ruby lips beneath her chin. Kanako's throat had been slit. Her chest was drenched in blood. You know, in movies and on TV, people who die of slashed throats almost always just drop dead really quickly, but that almost never happens in real life. It's only so much space for the blood to come out of, and you've got a lot of it in you, don't you know? Just thought y'all might be interested. I gasped and moved my mouth helplessly. How do you know that, Doctor? What is it you think I do for a living? Come on, respect the lore. It's the only thing I have going for me. Emily. I gasped and moved my mouth helplessly. I couldn't tell if I was trying to say something or struggling to get air into my lungs.
死んでる。
静かにして。
I put a finger to my lips.
だって彼女。
トールがやったんじゃないのね。
I was horrified.
僕がそんなことするわけないだろう。
じゃあなんで彼女がここにいるの？
I shot me an accusing look.
僕は何も。彼女が突然やってきて一緒に飲もうって。
The more I remembered, the quieter my voice got.
色仕掛けってわけね。
Mari said something strange.
色仕掛け。どういう意味だよ。
I didn't answer. Instead, she walked over to Kanako's body. I peered at the corpse from behind her. Kanako's features were distorted by shock and horror. She looked nothing like she had in life. I turned away, fighting the urge to vomit. I couldn't believe Mario was able to so calmly examine a dead body like that. Suddenly, I noticed some letters written on the floor near Kanako's lifeless arm. Written in blood.
マリ、これは。
They clearly spelled out a single word.
かまいたち。
Alright, so the culprit was whoever sent that Kamaitachi letter, which was no doubt... Was it Tanaka? Can't have been Tanaka. Tanaka's too obvious. Kanako, her throat slit, must have written that with her own blood as she lay there dying. Well, it's a message that's not actually that helpful in isolation, which means it's probably real. Her final message here on this earth. And it was Kamaitachi. The hell did it mean? Did one of those Kamaitachi whirlwinds appear just like the note predicted? And had it sliced Kaneko's throat wide open?
そんなことって。
Mari raised her voice in surprise, as if she had just read my mind.
そうだよな。いくらなんでもかまいたちで人間の喉が切れたりしないよな。
If such a thing had actually happened, my throat would have been sliced open as well. I shuddered at the thought. Mari stared at me with a strange look on her face. Had she understood what I meant?
何言ってるの？誰かがやったのに決まってるでしょ。これは殺人よ。
Was a moida. A fromocide.
それは分かってるさ。分かってるよ。でもかまいたちって。
There's gotta be some relevance to Kamaitachi, otherwise the title of this game doesn't make any sense.
これは気にしなくていいわ。関係ないわよ。
You seem very sure. Mari swiftly shut me down.
関係ないって。だってあの手紙にも。
そんなことは今問題じゃないでしょ。誰かがこのペンションにいる誰かが彼女を殺したのよ。
Mari interrupted me, obviously annoyed.
そりゃそうだけど。
おじさんに知らせなくちゃ。
Mari stood back up.
トールはここにいて。誰も入れちゃダメよ。
You're handling this awfully professionally, my good lady. Strange. Was it me, or did Mari seem curiously accustomed to situations like this? Even though I was suspicious of her business-like demeanor, I had little choice but to nod my head. Mari quietly opened the door. She did a quick scan of the hallway and slipped outside. 5 minutes passed. When Kobayashi finally returned with Mari, he had a serious expression, the likes of which I'd never seen on him before. He entered the room without a word, and stared at Kaneko's corpse for a while.
あの。
I started to say something, but Kobayashi put a finger to his lips. Seemed he didn't want anyone talking. He looked around to the room, then got down on all fours like a dog, began searching under the bed and nightstand. After a while, he reached under the bed. He stood back up, with a black object pinched between his fingers. It looked like a small cockroach. Was it a bug? Oh. Either that or it's just something from soup that he forgot to get out. Kobayashi walked over to the window, opened it, threw the object out into the snow, then closed the window again. The hell was that, I wondered. I was about to ask out loud, but then I caught myself. Kobayashi still seemed to be looking for something. He found the bottle of wine on the floor, picked it up, and gave it a sniff. And I thought you were acting professional earlier. Never sniff liquids you find at the crime scene. You waft them with your hand. Don't want to absorb any droplets. Doofus. Then he retrieved one of the fallen glasses, poured some wine inside and swirled it around. Then he gave one more sniff before taking a tiny sip.
睡眠薬。
Mari asks in a whisper.
いや、多分自白剤の一種だろ
自白剤？
That's not even a real thing. I sounded slightly frantic. I had heard of such things before, of course. Instead of a person being tortured, they'd be injected with truth serum and interrogated for important information. But why would anyone want to do that to me?
大きな声を出さないで。それでおじさん、彼女は何者なのかしら。
Because if you two are spies, you're very bad at maintaining your covers.
う。さあな。
Kobayashi inspected the label of the wine bottle.
ブルゴーニュ産の極上品。それも当たり年のものだ。間違いなく SDACA の連中だろうな。他の連中ならこんなところでこだわったりはしないはずだ。
The STECE? The Society for the Development of Electric Cat Engines? I should have known.
なんですって？ SDA？
When she replied, Mari's tone made it clear she thought such things should be common knowledge.
フランス情報部のことよ。
Okay. Oh, they're French. I should have known.
フランス情報部？
I was so shocked I forgot all about keeping my voice down. Mari and Kobayashi shushed me at the same time.
さっきの虫は？
どこの連中だって日本製を使うに決まってるじゃないか。それにあの盗聴器を仕掛けたのが彼女なのか、彼女を殺したやつなのかもわからない。
I gulped and responded in a near whisper.
一体何の冗談です？フランス情報部だとか盗聴器だとか。
Wasn't a wiretap, it was a bug. Wiretaps are different things. You gotta install them in the phones. But even if I asked, I could tell by the expressions on Mari's and Kobayashi's faces that this was no laughing matter. Kobayashi considered Mari and me for a few moments. Then, seeming like he'd decided something, began to speak.
こうなってしまった以上、君にも教えておいた方がいいだろう。
Mari gave him a disapproving look, then shrugged her shoulders in resignation.
しょうがないでしょうね。
まさかマリもどこかのスパイだなんて冗談は言わないでしょうね。
So what did she see out the window earlier? That's what brought all this on. I offered him a strained smile.
スパイという言い方は当てはまらないよ。我々は日本国内における他国の諜報活動を監視するのを主な任務としている。君は知ってるかね？この国がスパイ天国と言われていることを。
Really? I thought that was like more of, I don't know, a country with an active military presence around the world and a nuclear program's a gimmick.
スパイ天国？
Spy Paradise, available now from HBO.
そうだ。君たちはスパイだの情報組織だのというものはどこか遠くの国の話か映画の中のフィクションだと思っているかもしれない。自分たちとは無縁のね。
Spies. But good lord, this line is long. Anyway, as I was saying, spies. Everyone knows spies are just a myth.
というのも、この日本にはスパイ活動を制限する法律やシステムが全くと言っていいくらい存在しない。だから彼らにとっては世界中で日本ほど活動しやすい場所はないわけなんだ。
So that's what it was, huh? A spy paradise indeed.
輸出規制されたコンピュータハードやソフトをこっそり海外へ持ち出して売る連中。それに産業スパイのようなものまで含めれば、日本中スパイがうようよいると言っても過言ではない状況だ。
Yeah, why make your own stuff and you can just commit theft?
決して他人事ではないんだよ。
でも僕はただの大学生ですよ。
彼女はそうは思わなかったようだ。
Kobayashi flicked his gaze over to Kaneko's corpse.
そうは思わなかったって。じゃあ一体何だと思ったんです？
Just who the hell do you think I am? No, seriously, I'd like to know. Please, I'm very lost right now. Kobayashi didn't answer right away. When I opened my mouth to ask again, Kobayashi finally spoke.
かまいたちかもしれない。そう考えたんだろう。
Yes, in Soviet spy paradise Japan, a monster wears a mask to disguise itself as a human. They'll try to drive people away so they can get the land for cheap, though. That's the one universal constant. I stared at him in confusion, unable to understand the meaning of the words he just said.
ちょっと待ってください。かまいたち？かまいたちってのはじゃあ。
Mari, who answered. If we gave too many lines to any one voice actor, their fee would get out of control.
そう、妖怪でも自然現象でもないの。10年ほど前に少しずつその存在を囁かれるようになった伝説的な東側のスパイの暗号名よ。
So I can't help but notice that silhouette is just Tanaka, with zero modifications.
東側のスパイって言ったって。だってもうソ連は存在しないし。
Yes, that's just what we wanted you to think.
だから問題なのよ。
Yes, that wouldn't pose a problem to your story. I'm glad you noticed. She looked at me like I was a bit slow.
ソ連を含めて東側の勢力がほとんど崩壊した今、かまいたちは雇い主を失った形になったわけ。彼、あるいは彼女には一体どんな道があるかしら。
So why would a spy from Russia or somewhere in that general neck of the woods name themselves after a Japanese yokai? That's awfully convenient. I gave it some thought, then offered a suggestion. Maybe you could always just, learn a new trade, maybe get into baking. I hear that's pretty popular nowadays. Come on, buddy. You can learn to...
転職する？
スパイが今さら何になれるっていうのよ。違うわよ。新しい雇い主を探すの。
Nia, don't you do it. Nia, don't you do it. Nia, don't you do it. Nia, don't you... Come on, just get it over with. You're ruining the comedic timing a whole bit. Come on. Anyway, you really expect me to believe that if the next spy went out and flipped burgers, that restaurant... You really expect me to believe that if an ex-spy went out and started his own restaurant, that wouldn't immediately, just become a massive selling point? They would probably do gangbusters, as the children say.
新しい雇い主。
A new employer. I still didn't understand.
いい？長い間東側のために働いてきたかまいたちは、米ソの緊張が緩んだ今でさえ重要な情報を数多く持っているはずなの。
I mean, How much would they trust with just a spy? It's just one dude who talks to people for a living.
中には自衛隊や在日米軍に関する重要機密も含まれているでしょう。そういった情報を手に入れるためならどんな大金でも積むという国はたくさんあるわ。
If the guy's so successful, why doesn't he have a retirement pension, huh? I think he might be a bit oversold.
そして逆に言うと、そういった情報をどこかの国に奪われることは日本にもまたアメリカにとっても大きな打撃になる。できることならかまいたちをこちらの味方にしたい。それができなくても別の誰かの手に情報を渡すことだけは阻止しなくてはならないのよ。
Like in a any means necessary kind of way, or... It all sounded so wildly implausible. Almost like this was some sort of non-canon side story. Mari was supposed to be a regular cute college girl. But she was actually in her mid-40s. She just aged very gracefully. It was a story that I wouldn't have believed if she'd told me under normal circumstances. But there was a dead body sitting here in front of me. It was hard to argue those were normal circumstances. I had to take Mari at her word. But still, I had some lingering questions.
そのかまいたちが僕じゃないかと思われたってことなのか。一体どうしてこんな山の中にスパイなんかがいるはずないじゃないか。
I mean, where do you expect to find a spy? The answer is a place where you wouldn't expect to find a spy. But if you knew that would be the place, then you would expect to find a spy there, so it wouldn't be a good place to find a spy. If that's the case, then that would make it a perfect place to hide a spy, because nobody would expect to find a spy there. But everybody knows you'd be thinking that way, so oh no, I've gone cross-eyed. Mari glanced over at Kobayashi. He picked up the story where she'd left off.
いや、実は今晩ここにかまいたちが現れるというのはどうやら確からしいんだ。君も見ただろう？あの OL たちが持ってきた手紙を。
You're being astonishingly helpful for somebody who is allegedly supposed to be undercover. I remembered, alright. The Kamaitachi comes tonight. So this is what the note was talking about.
我々もまた独自にかまいたちが近々このペンションでどこかの国の情報部と接触するという情報を掴んでいたんだ。幸い時間の余裕があったから我々はオーナーの協力を取り付け、こうして網を張ることにしたわけだ。
And I was involved because...
じゃあ小林さんはここのオーナーじゃ。
当たり前でしょ。本当のオーナーは今頃海外旅行を楽しんでるはずよ。
He's on vacation in Bali.
マリのおじさんってのも嘘だったのか。
I'd realized far too late that they duped me. We've been duped, bamboozled, we've been smackledorved. And I'm starting to resent it. Mari's reply made it clear she wasn't about to spare my feelings.
まあね。でも遠い親戚だからまるっきりの嘘ってわけでもないのよ。
一体なんで僕をこんなところへ誘ったりしたんだ。
Was it all a lie? Even the possibility that Mari might have liked me even a little? Mari understandably had a hard time answering, so Kobayashi did it for her.
カモフラージュのためだよ。若いアベックの客なら警戒されにくいからね。もちろん若い男の部員もいなかったわけではなかったんだが。
Yeah, there's been like 5 James Bonds by this point already. And Criminy.
熟練したプロの目を欺くには、本当に何も知らない普通の学生を使うのが一番だと結論したんだ。
Yep, When in doubt, always involve outsiders in your plan. Never goes poorly. This whole ski trip was nothing but a cover story. I wasn't sure whether to be sad about that fact. Or angry.
あの二人も仲間なのかしら。
I seem to be referring to the remaining two girls. Yeah, man, I wonder how much mental trauma it takes to lose part of your own hive mind like that. For all we know, we're gonna go back in there and find them both just lying on the floor, frothing at the mouth and twitching.
そう考えた方がいいだろうな。
One must imagine.
警察に連絡しなくていいんですか？殺人事件なんですよ。
Call the police? What, like a coward? I don't think so.
かまいたちを捕まえるのが先決だ。今警察が来たら、奴は絶対正体を表さないだろう。
でも殺人犯はかまいたちなんじゃないですか？きちんと捜査すれば捕まえられるかもしれませんよ。
If the Kamaitachi was the murderer, how would Kanako know that?
いや、かまいたちが犯人とは限らない。あのダイイングメッセージは犯人がわざと残したものかもしれないからね。
なんで犯人がそんなことをする必要があります？
あの手紙と同じだよ。かまいたちをあぶり出すためだ。
I mean, I don't see why any of this would encourage the Kamaitachi to show up. It's very obviously a trap. It's like that one Silver Age comic where Lex Luthor killed Superman by writing Lex Luthor's trap for Superman on a big building, and then Superman was like, okay, this I gotta see. He walks inside and it's just a building full of kryptonite. What's your New Year's revolution? Nia, if either of us are still alive by that point, we will have already surpassed my wildest expectations. What was that? Must have been the wind. Colonel. What's this lizard thing? That's a Yoshi snake. It's a dinosaur from Yoshi's Island. I know, I was totally lost. His resolution is to be less... His resolution is to be less bitchy. Best of luck to you. The ones that involve just changing your own personality like that are always the hardest. Yes, even harder than the dieting ones. I would know. Mari explained further. He's a dinosaur. Look at her. Look at her, look at her. She's so precious. Alright. Now that we've all had our mandatory decompression, we explained further.
あの手紙は多分あの女の子たちが書いたのよ。みんなに見せて回ってその反応を確かめるためにね。
Precious. Precious. Precious, my precious there.
私はそれに反応してしまった。だから私と一緒にいたトールも仲間だと思って接近してきたんでしょう。何者か確かめるために。
And now they're dead. Good going, Chief. For plan. So that's what happened. Ow. So about that New Year's resolution. I was finally convinced.
とりあえず死体を隠そう。
When in doubt, hide the body. Kobayashi said this as if it should be obvious. Mari nodded. Kobayashi peeled the sheet off the room's other bed and laid it out next to the body.
何ぼーっとしてるんだ。死体をここへ転がしてくれ。
Wouldn't that just spread the blood everywhere? This is gonna be a real pain to clean up. He sounded irritated.
僕がですか？
決まってるじゃないか。
Mari wasn't lifting a finger to help. Seeing little shows, I helped Kobayashi roll the body onto the bedsheet. This is entrapment. Come on, man. You would never be able to get this to actually stick if you try to blackmail us afterwards. And why else would he insist? Red stains started to seep across fresh white linen.
さあ、バスルームに運ぼう。
Well, I guess we could never use this bathroom again. With me at her feet and Kobayashi at her head, we carried Kaneko's wrapped corpse inside the bathroom.
死体だけ隠したって床は血まみれですよ。
My voice was trembling.
分かってる。
Kobayashi grabbed a towel and began wiping down the floorboards. That is not going to work, my good man. I'm sorry. But they still weren't coming completely clean. Come on, man. Blood is so difficult to clean up. Call yourself a professional. Just as I was noticing that, Kobayashi stopped mopping and poured the remaining red wine onto the floor. Its rich bouquet seemed to mask the scent of blood.
しばらくはこれでごまかせるだろう。朝まで誰も入れるんじゃないぞ。
Kobayashi fixed me with a stare and started to leave. No, it isn't. Okay, which of us is the professional here, Nia? I think you're so goddamn smart.
"ちょっと待ってください。このままここで寝ろって言うんですか？あれと一緒に。
I don't know, you were so excited to do it earlier. I glanced at the bathroom door.
仕方ないだろう。何もなかったふりをするんだ。もし彼女の仲間が探しに来ても、知らぬ存ぜぬで押し通すんだ。
Mr. Kobayashi, I won't have to play. I started to protest, saying there was no way I'd be spending the night with a dead body. But Kobayashi wasn't listening and slipped out the door. Mari was still here, however, and I looked at her with a faint glimmer of hope in my heart. She smiled apologetically.
ごめんね。一晩だけ我慢してちょうだい。じゃあ、おやすみ。
Okay, but what do we do when it starts smelling? Not showing an ounce of mercy, she left the room. Then it was just me and the corpse, all alone together. Even though I couldn't see inside the bathroom, there was no way I'd be able to sleep in a murder scene. One that still had bloodstains on the floor, no less. I was prepared to stay up all night if I had to. But how could I distract myself? Me and my friend. We're closer than brothers. But now we fight each other and we put all our faith in the heart of the cards. I don't actually remember the tune to that one. But hey, we have a friend. It's everything we ever wanted. So, I mean, I'd like to know about Tota's taste in literature. That'd be very interesting. Is it gonna be a classic mystery novel I can brag about having knowledge of? Sure hope so. I took out the paperback novel I'd brought with me to pass the time. I'd quickly grabbed something from my back on the way out the door, so I took a moment to remind myself what I'd picked. Stephen King's The Shine. Okay. You dirty conformist. Honestly, here I was, thinking maybe you had some taste. A rare example of the book where the movie's better. At the time, it seemed like the perfect choice to bring with me to the snowy mountains. But now... I decided not to read my book after all. There was a magazine in my room and I decided to read it. From cover to cover. But the dead body kept intruding into my thoughts. I couldn't get it out of my head. Even as I struggled to stay focused, morning inexorably approached. Just before 6 o'clock, I decided I couldn't take it anymore and went downstairs. The blizzard still showed no signs of slowing. With all the lights off, the lounge seemed terribly gloomy. Midori emerged from the dining room and looked at me with a start.
びっくりした。早いのね。
おはようございます。
That's no way to greet an old friend. Come on, put a little enthusiasm in it.
おはよう。やっぱり眠れなかったのね。
She knew it. As I tried to figure out what she'd meant by that, she came over and whispered something in my ear.
心配しないで。ボスから聞いてるわ。変なことに巻き込まれちゃったわね。
Enthusiasm, I wish I had that. It's not difficult to pretend in extremely short bursts. Midori gave me a reassuring smile. Was that right? Since that Kobayashi had convinced the real owner to step aside, it made sense that Toshio and Midori would be his agents. I felt slightly more reassured.
眠気覚ましにコーヒーでも飲む？朝食までまだ時間があるけど。
I gratefully accepted. I also asked Midori to turn on the lights, and as I sat there in the lounge and sipped my hot coffee, the stressy knots that had formed all throughout my body seemed to melt away. I mean, yeah, the murder and the dead body, that's all really uncomfortable. But hey, on the upside, coffee. Between the anxiety and the lack of sleep, I hadn't realized how tired I actually was. Mari came downstairs around 6:30 a.m. The dining room was alive with the sounds of breakfast being prepared.
おはよう。眠れた？
She gave me an easy grin as if nothing had happened. As I'd been so angry I hadn't slept a wink. I was about to say something, but then I froze. The remaining two girls were coming down the stairs behind Mari.
まあね。
The girls didn't seem particularly interested in Mari or me. For all I knew, they could just be regular white-collar types who'd gotten dragged out here as camouflage, same as me. As Mari sat down next to me, Aki Kawamura, the girl with glasses, approached me with a worried look on her face.
失礼ですけど、私たちと一緒だった髪の長い子、どこかで見かけませんでした？
Her dead... someone slit her throat last night, her dead body's in my bathroom. Shit. Did she know Kaneko had come into my room? Was she just testing me? She looked like your average young office worker worried about her friend. But was that all an act? I didn't know the truth of the matter, but I did my best to sound convincing. Yep, when in doubt, just bluff wildly.
いえ、知りませんよ。
I glanced over at Mari and she shook her head as well. The two girls didn't pursue the matter any further. Instead, they bowed politely and went off to the dining room, which was still being prepped for breakfast. I could hear them talking to Midori about something, but their voices were too muffled to tell what. I glanced over at Mari and gave her a look that said, that okay? She silently nodded. Mr. and Mrs. Kayama were the next to come down. Could one of them be the Kamaitachi? Right behind them was the big man named Mikimoto. He was still wearing the same clothes as last night. He had way more Kamaitachi potential than either of the Kayamas. His Kamaitachi level, it's an S triple plus. I've never seen anything like it before.
おはようございます。あ、おはよう。
He repeated his greeting with a smile on his bearded face. But that affable manner of his could be a mask. Yeah. Imagine if Mikimoto's nice guy routine was all an act. That'd be hilarious. The three newcomers sat down on the couch and waited for breakfast.
朝食のご用意ができました。
So, like, is Tanaka still dead? No one's checked on him as far as I can say. Kyoko appeared just as the cuckoo clock began to chime. Right. And to think of it, she might not be Kobayashi's real wife either. Mara and I sat at the same table as the night before. Oh no, hey. My god, you have a second CG, I'm so proud of you. After a while, that Tanaka guy entered the dining room as well. His eyes were hidden behind sunglasses. Same as last time. Surely he was the most suspicious person in this lodge. And again, Kaneko Watase had ended up being a spy. So if he really was a spy as well, he'd probably be trying to be less conspicuous.
あんまりジロジロ見ないの。
I barely moved her lips as she admonished me. Maybe she thought I was looking mighty suspicious myself. I took her advice and focused on my breakfast. Freshly baked rolls, French bread, thick crispy bacon, scrambled eggs. Damn man, it's too late in the day to do this to me, now I'm hungry. It was a fairly traditional breakfast, but delicious nonetheless. So was Kobayashi actually the one cooking this? Did he learn how to cook at spy school? Would be implausible. I didn't know who'd prepared it, but their true talents were being wasted as a spy. And I wonder if they'd intentionally chosen someone who was a good cook for this assignment. As I ate my breakfast, the previous night began to feel like a bad dream. Like, seriously, y'all do realize that, like, blood and corpses smell real bad, don't you? Like, that's a thing? I know it's probably decently chilly outside, but come on. The window ain't broken this time. Maybe Kobayashi was just the unassuming proprietor of a ski lodge after all. Couldn't that be so? Is that too much to ask for? And Mari, she was just an ordinary college student. I looked over at the table where the other two girls sat with worried expressions on their faces. Are these really Kaneko Watase's accomplices? One of them? Or maybe even both? Maybe even all three of them? Probably not Kaneko though, she seems fine. My head swam with countless doubts and fears. In a situation like this, even the most ordinary of meals had become a high-stakes guessing game. Tanaka, the late cop, was the first to finish eating and get up from his chair. He hurried from the dining room and went back upstairs.
私先に戻ってるから、トールはゆっくり食べててね。
I mean, if you insist. No food goes to waste, that's my policy. Mari got up from our table, trying to act casual.
どうし
She winked at me as I started to ask a question. Then, with a serious expression on her face, she flicked her eyes upwards. Alright. I was probably going to follow that Tanaka guy. And she wanted me to stay here to keep an eye on the rest of the guests. It's putting a lot of stock in us for someone who was a total outsider. So, who was the most suspicious among those still in the dining room? Maybe that Mikimoto character sitting over there by himself? But according to Kobayashi, the Kamaitachi had become famous over the last decade or so. Which meant our spy friend had been at it for quite some time. In that case, perhaps an older man like Ayama might be a more likely suspect. Then what about Haruko? I mean, I guessed it wouldn't be strange for the Kamaitachi to have a spouse. Perhaps they actually loved each other. Or maybe their marriage was just a convenient cover story. And where else are the two remaining girls to consider? Assuming they weren't both French intelligence. I doubted some ordinary person who'd been brought here as camouflage would actually turn out to be the Kamaitachi. I should also be able to exclude the staff, Toshio and Midori, from my list of suspects. You shouldn't say that if you're not prepared to provide some grounds for it. It's a bit of an assumption. So that left Mikimoto, Tanaka, Mr. and Mrs. Kayama. One of those three people must be the Kamaitachi. Since I'd been able to narrow it down that far, was there some way I could confirm my suspicions? Well, I seem to have eyes on Tanaka for now. When I saw Mikimoto get up and leave the dining room, I automatically got to my feet as well. I doubted there was anything I could do as an amateur, of course. But that didn't lessen my anger at whomever it was that had broken into my room, planted a listening device, and committed murder. And yes, maybe I was also angry with Mari, the person who'd gotten me into this mess to begin with. What a fine kettle of fish it was. Mikimoto seemed to be headed upstairs. And yet nobody had reached what's upstairs. I mean, probably not much, but still would be polite, you know? I pretended it just had to be going that way as well. Our rooms were in the same direction, so it probably wouldn't arouse any suspicion. I hung a little ways back as I followed him up to the second floor. Then, while pretending to have some trouble unlocking my door, I watched Mikimoto enter his room from the corner of my eye. Well, what now? As I stood there pondering that question, Mikimoto's door reopened, and he came back out into the hallway. And started walking towards me. I had no choice but to pretend that I'd finally gotten my door open. I quickly slipped inside. As I went to close the door, it was violently forced open and someone jumped me. I was shoved down to the floor before I could raise my voice. My arms twisted behind my back. And everybody was so eager to attack us. Why only us? Come on. Mikimoto's voice was barely a whisper. Yet so laced with menace that my heart shrank in fear. He demanded an answer. My face was being pressed against the floor, so I could only get my words out in small bursts. You'll need a head of a mouth to talk. So if he breaks your jaw, you should still be able to be comprehensible. Wanna test it out?
お前もかまいたちを狙ってるんだろう。違うか。
I mean, if you are, you're gonna look real stupid on your case report after this.
違います。
I rushed to answer him, and I quickly realized I'd stepped wrong with my response.
かまいたちが何かは聞かなくても分かってるようだな。
Toru, what's the point of giving me some choices if you're just going to cock up all my plans as soon as you get end agency? That's why I don't let Chris handle things themselves. And I racked my brains for something to explain that one away, but I came up blank.
さあ、吐けよ。どこに雇われてる？
どこにも雇われてなんかない。僕は何も。
Pain lanced up my arm as he twisted it harder.
もっと手荒な真似をさせたいのか。さあ、どこに雇われてるか喋るんだ。さもないと。
Seriously, you keep doing this. Do you have a fetish or something? Man, there are people who are consent to shit like this. You don't gotta keep doing this. His words suddenly cut off. The pressure on my arm eased, and Mikimoto tumbled off to the side. I scrambled to my feet and turned around, only to find Mari standing there.
マリ。
だらしないわね、男のくせに。
Kind who didn't spend their entire childhood in a super spy training camp or whatever the hell is up with you. God. You all are the worst spies in the world and none of you can maintain a cover personality. Been in here for like a day and I've already gotten in fistfights with 3 separate secret agents. Come on. Seriously, hadn't she noticed the difference in size between me and Mikimoto? Not to mention the fact that I didn't have any spy training.
何か言いたそうね。何？
別に何も。
あ、そう。じゃあ服を調べるから手伝って。
I asked this in the same way she might ask for help with the dishes. Well, dish is a very bad idea. Together, we turned the unconscious Mikimoto over and rifled through his pockets.
一体どうやってやっつけたんだ。
Nerve strike. I didn't seem to be holding anything that looked like a weapon, so I felt compelled to ask it's gonna be a nerve strike.
首に人を叩き込んでやっただけよ。急所さえ知ってれば力入れなくたっていいの。何も持ってないわね。部屋に行きましょう。
I'm counting that as a nerve strike. It doesn't work in real life, though. Don't try this at home, children.
行きましょうって僕も。
当たり前でしょ。女の子一人で心配じゃないの。
You know, Spy Mari is kind of a bitch. Don't know what you saw in her.
全然心配じゃないよ。
After she'd felled Mikimoto with a single blow to the neck, I had a hard time thinking of her as just a girl. Mari gave me a wounded look.
ひどい。私のこと嫌いなのね。
Honestly, kind of, yes.
いや、嫌いとかそういうんじゃなくて。
As tears began to well up in Mari's big, beautiful eyes, I panicked.
わかったよ。どこでも行くから。
Like, beautiful in the sense that they go well with her face, or like you want to pop them out and keep them on a keychain? The moment I caved, Mari wiped away her tears and turned to me with a dispassionate expression.
わかればいいのよ。
今泣いてたのは。
I'd fallen for her crocodile tears, because I have literally zero sense of pattern recognition.
さあ、こいつはと。縛ってクローゼットに入れときましょう。
You know, we're running out of places in this room. I had little choice but to comply. Working quickly, Mari took off his belt and lashed his ankles together with it, and used his jacket to tie his hands behind his back. She gagged him with a towel from the bathroom, then together we shoved him inside the closet. After a while, the whole experience left me feeling strangely numb. Yeah, it's just muscular strain, don't think too hard about it. We went back out into the hallway, took a quick look to make sure nobody was around, then went over to Mikimoto's door. Fortunately, he'd left his room unlocked. Mari ducked inside and I followed right behind her. She removed a change of clothes from the top of the bag, then lifted out a strange machine. A moment later, she pulled out something else that looked like a pistol.
無線機だわ。それにこっちは信号弾ね。かまいたちを発見したら、近くで待機している仲間が駆けつける手はずになってたのね。
Alright, it says here this gun was manufactured by Chekhov. Interesting. Very interesting.
仲間？この吹雪の中でじっと待ってるのか？
屋根のあるところを確保してるでしょうけどね。この近くにいるのは確かよ。一人でかまいたちを国外へ連れて行けるわけないでしょ。当然本人が抵抗する場合もあるでしょうしね。
I had to consider the abstract concept that there might be a struggle of some sort. Mari had been searching the rest of the room as she spoke. In the process, she seemed to have found a passport. Seemed like a standard-issue Japanese travel document. When she looked inside, the name said Koichi Miki. The photo was definitely of Mikimoto. Flipped to the back of the passport to examine the visa stamps.
アメリカが多いみたいね。ラングレーの連中かしら。
Langley. This time I actually knew what she was referring to. Langley was where the CIA was headquartered.
アメリカとなら手を組んだっていいんじゃないのか？
It was a simple enough question, but Mari shot me a look of utter disbelief.
何言ってるの？ソ連の脅威が消え去った今、アメリカにとって第一の敵は日本よ。
I think you might be giving yourself a bit too much credit. The island nation of Wa.
さまざまな取引の材料にするためにも、お互いかまいたちを手に入れたがってるの。手を組むなんてとんでもない。
Well, I guess that was that. Mikimoto had turned out to be one of the spies chasing after the Kamaitachi. Which meant our list of suspects was now down to Tanaka and the Kayamas.
田中の様子は？
I remembered Mari had been tailing him earlier.
部屋でおとなしくしてるみたい。盗聴器は仕掛けてあるけど、何も聞こえてこないわ。
I mean, he might have just found it and disposed of it in that case. You ever think of that?
彼がかまいたちかな？
一番怪しいのは確かね。
かまいたちがやったんじゃないとしたら、彼女を殺したのは一体誰なんだろう？
かまいたちを捕まえた後で調べればいいことよ。
Kaneko Watase wasn't exactly an innocent civilian, so there was no need to feel sorry for her, but still. That felt cold. When this mission was over, would Mari go back to being the sweet college girl I once knew? Or was that personality a disguise as well? Looking at this case, I don't think Mari particularly has any ability to disguise her personality. Kinda bad at this.
さあ、早く出ましょう。
Mari put her ear to the door to make sure there was no one on the other side, then slipped out into the hallway. I quickly followed suit. Trying to act now, she strolled back to my room. Once inside, she immediately checked on how Mikimoto was doing in the closet. He still seems to be unconscious. Eyes closed, same as the last time I'd seen him. But that would also be very easy to pretend if all he has to do is close his eyes. And if you close your eyes, March to the bindings of his wrists and ankles for any slack, then push the closet shut once again.
ちょっとお手洗い貸してね。
Mario was already starting to open the bathroom door.
でもそこには
I was about to say dead body. A woman sprang for the bathroom and attacked Mari. Okay, she was only mostly dead in our defense. The body had come back to life? Mari cried out.
何つったってんのよ。なんとかして。
You have no sense of self-preservation, do you? Looking more closely, I could see that Mari was locked in battle with Aki Kawamura, now sans her trademark glasses. Aki was raising an ice pick into the air, probably looking to stab Mari right between the eyes. I really like this CG, but I can't put a name as to what. I guess just kind of stands out seeing Aki actually having an unfettered look at her face. I don't know, I'm kind of rooting for her on this one, honestly. I suppose she was a little upset to find the corpse of her associate crammed inside my bathroom. How do we want to approach this? If we kick the ice pick, that would make the least noise. I mean, assuming we don't impale our own foot on the tip and wind up screaming. But if that happened, it would be extremely funny, which is really the most important thing here. Let's try it. With one powerful blow, I sent Aki Kawamura's weapon flying. Okay, when the hell did you develop baseline competency? Not a chance. In reality, I tried knocking the ice pick out of her hands, but only managed to kick the slipper off my own foot. It hit the ceiling and landed somewhere behind me. I heard a strange grunt at my back. I turned to find Keiko Kitano standing there, a gloved hand pressed to her eyes. Her other hand held what looked to be piano wire. She'd been about to garrote me from behind. My slipper had caught her square on the face. All according to plan. Talk about a lucky break. I grabbed her arm and tried to twist it behind her back. The next thing I knew, the room started spinning, and I was slipped down to the floor, the wind had knocked out of me. I couldn't comprehend what had just happened. Toto, I'm beginning to get the sensation there's a lot you don't comprehend. It was like she'd got me into an Aikido throw or something. She looped the piano wire around my neck from behind and started to pull it towards her. I jammed my fingers between the wire and my neck, only to feel it slicing through my flesh an instant later. Fishing line. I've seen it used in more cases than guns, knives, and bludgeons put together. Pretty terrifying. Now you've got to think at some point they'd pass some sort of gun control law against it, but no. Nope, it's still just available for anyone. That wire was as sharp as a knife. With a jerk, the piano wire began to tighten, biting into my fingers and throat. I frankly tried to think of something to do. Anything. But in the end, I had nothing. Come on, you can't just, bash her in the nose with the back of your head, something? I mean, come on.
その人は関係ないわ。手を離しなさい。
That Mari shouted demand, the tension on the wire loosened ever so slightly.
じゃあ、あなたが何者か話しなさいよ。
Keiko Kitana quietly countered from behind me.
分かったわ。分かったから、彼女に6ように言ってちょうだい。
Aki Kawamura got off Mari and stood without having to be told. Mari sat up, ran her hands through her hair, and straightened her clothes before speaking.
私は日本の傍聴機関のものよ。もちろん公的には存在しないことになっているものだけど。
この男は
Keiko motioned at me.
彼は無関係よ。カモフラージュのために連れてきただけ。
I think Toru wanted to do things under the covers. The poor doofus.
じゃあ、なんで彼女を殺したのよ。
Keiko's professional veneer fell away in a moment of pure anger.
彼に殺せたはずがないわ。私が昨夜この部屋に来た時には、お仲間が飲ませた薬のせいで、彼はすっかり意識をなくしてたんだから。彼女を殺したのは別の誰かよ。
第一発見者を疑うってのが常識じゃなくて
Okay, you know, like, the door wasn't locked or anything, right? This isn't a compelling argument in this case. Aki Kawamura asked this rather pointedly, and Mari just shrugged.
疑いたければ疑いなさい。でも、日本側に彼女を殺すメリットがあるかどうか、よく考えてみることね。
The two girls, no, the two French spies, looked at each other. A moment later, I felt the tension go out of the room. The immediate danger seemed to have passed. Incredible. I've never felt such small killing intent.
じゃあ、あのクローゼットの中の男は
Apparently, they'd done a thorough search of the room before we got here. They must have made a mad dash for the bathroom when they'd heard us coming.
多分 CIA よ。
かまいたちは一体どこにいるの
Why am I glad that he's frozen in there and that we're out here? That he's the sheriff and we're frozen out here and we're in there and I just remembered we're in here. What I want to know is where's the Kamaitachi?
こっちこそ教えてもらいたいくらいよ。
After a heavy silence, Aki Kawamura spoke once more.
全部終わったら彼女を弔ってやってくれる
She probably meant the dead body in the bathroom. Mari nodded. Just then, there was a knock at the door.
大変。バスルームに隠れて。
What if they are asking to use the bathroom? I hissed at them. But the two girls were already in motion before the words were out of her mouth. Mari waited for the bathroom door to close, then opened the door to the room. Midori was standing there. She seemed surprised to see Mari in my room.
こんなところにいたのオーナーが見当たらないんだけどどこに行ったか知らない
Okay, are any of you good at your jobs? Are any of you even real spies? Come on. This is embarrassing. I'm a better spy than any of you, and I'm not even a spy as far as you need to know.
いいえ。京子さんも知らないの？
そうなの
Had something terrible happened to him? Man, the body count is going up really quickly this case. The atmosphere began to grow tense again.
私も一緒に探すわ。トールはどうする？
I turned and asked me. I thought about it for a moment, then answered. You know, I'm not accomplishing anything staying here.
僕も行くよ。
I didn't want to be left here with all this. And besides, I figured I'd be safer with Mari.
そう。じゃあ、
Mari whispered something in Midori's ear.
さあ、行きましょう。
She pulled on my arm.
みどりさんは
彼女にはあの人たちの面倒を見てもらうわ。
But what if she is the Kamaitachi? Oh no, you fool. She glanced at the bathroom as she whispered this in my ear.
面倒って。
あそこに閉じ込めて催眠ガスで眠らせるのよ。さあ、おじさんを探しに行くわよ。
Man, really, no trust for anybody, huh? Anybody except the one person you shouldn't trust, that's always the way it is. We went downstairs, then decided to begin our search in the cellar. The door to the cellar was unlocked. Mari descended the narrow stairwell cautiously.
この下にいるのか。
Probably not.
わからないわ。でも他に考えられないし。おじさん、いるの？
There was no reply. Suddenly, I felt something hard being pressed into my back. Mikimoto? Is that you?
そのまま降りていくんや。
Okay. I heard a folksy Kansai accent behind me. Realizing what was happening, we both raised our hands.
二人とも黙って下に降りるんや。変な真似したら兄ちゃんの心臓に穴が2つ開くことになるで。弾の入り口と出口や。
How did you all get all these guns past security? Mari walked down to the bottom of the stairs, never once taking her eyes off Kayama and me. I looked around the cellar. No sign of Kobayashi. Or anyone else for that matter. I slowly turned, my hands still raised. Kayama was sitting on the stairs with a gun pointed at me. Okay, there's literally no reason for you to be doing this.
ああ、どっちがかまいたちや。
かまいたち？何のこと？
Mari feigned ignorance, but she was a terrible actress.
いや、あんたらかまいたちやないな。お国のために働いとる連中が。
Seeing that Mari had gone silent, Kayama smiled.
図星やったよやな。そうか、なるほど。すると、かまいたちはおそらく。
That's when it happened. From somewhere else in the lodge, there came a popping sound, like a firecracker going off. For a moment, Kayama took his eyes off us and looked up at the ceiling. Mari took advantage of that opening, grabbed a bottle from the wine racks, and threw it at Kayama's head. It sounded exactly like an entire window breaking. Strange. The heavy bottle struck Kayama in the elbow and fell to the floor, shattering. Wine splashed everywhere. By the time he swung the muzzle of his gun back towards us, Mari had already slipped behind and was delivering an open-handed chop to his neck. Unfortunately, all the fat rolls on there were going to absorb the blow. It was an effort, though. Kayama slowly collapsed to the pool of wine at his feet. As I stared at him dumbfounded, Mari snapped at me.
早くかまいたちを手に入れるのよ。
こいつは。
しばらくは目を覚まさないでしょ。さあ、急いで。
I mean, you might have broken his neck. He might not be getting up. Does that bother you at all? Can't be good for your cover. I followed after Mari, carefully skirting around Kayama as I did.
かまいたちを。
Kamayama.
一体誰なんだ。
The process of elimination.
葉山夫妻でもない、OL たちでもない、三木本でもない。残るのは一人だけでしょ。
やっぱり田中。
Man, I can't believe that guy who looked like a spy was actually a spy. Mari nodded. We continued upstairs, and Mari marched straight to Tanaka's door and started knocking.
Hi.
The voice that answered didn't seem particularly wary. A moment later, the door opened. Even though Tanaka was alone in his room, he was still wearing dark sunglasses and a hat. Mari smiled at him.
ちょっとお話があるんですけど、よろしいですか？
He slowly looked at the two of us, and shrugged.
どうぞ。
So is your hands just like, stuck that way? Maybe your eyes, like, so you can't look directly at people, you gotta always keep your head in an angle? Maybe he'd already resigned himself to capture, hoping that his cover had been blown. They stepped inside his room. Realizing he'd left a notebook open on his writing desk, Tanaka rushed to close it.
それで何のご用ですか？
He asked us this somewhat impatiently.
まず、あなたが何者か、私たちにはもう分かってるということは言っておきます。
He seemed visibly agitated by Mari's declaration. But he quickly regained his composure. A consummate professional. With coat, collar, and a consummate V.
そうですか。それじゃあ仕方ありませんね。で、それでどうしようと？
もちろん、取引です。
取引？ああ、あなたはここの人なんですね。
By here, I assumed he meant the Japanese side. Mari nodded. Tanaka, now with the Kamaitachi, gave a fierce smile and lay down on his bed.
取引ね。何で取引しようというんだね。金かい？
We're not just doing this for money. We're doing this for a shitload of money.
誰だってお金は必要でしょ？
Mari gave Tanaka a meaningful glance.
もちろんもちろん。誰だって金は必要だ。お姉ちゃんいいこと言うじゃねえか。それで、あんた方は一体いくら用意できるというんだね。
$10. I feel like you all just missed something really important. Don't allow me to just...
まず、
そう、
もち
取引
So we were just talking about cash, money, and
い
dollars.
くら、
いくらでも。
ええ、
その取引、わしらも入れてもらえんかな。
Anyways, I was just saying, man, you really did not go under long. Ironically, the stage where Mari is a trained super spy is the one where she is by far the least competent. Seriously, this is pathetic. Anyway, seriously, where are you getting these things? Look at that thing. I turned and saw Mr. and Mrs. Kayama standing in the open doorway. Mari had been about to leap into action when Haruka barked out her warning. Now she had a rather large pistol, With a silencer, is that what that's supposed to be? It looks more like a TAC 9 or something. Not like that specific model, but just the general sense of like, you know, a compact full auto. No, not a pistol. What I was pointed at Mario just now was more like a machine gun. Those are not the same thing, Toto. You can't just compare them and say no, really. Honestly.
今度はハったりじゃないよ。ちょっとでも動いたら体中の肉を拾い集めなきゃならないことになるよ。
You'd think someone here would have some respect for, like, the espionage part of the job. I mean, really. As someone who seems so soft-spoken, she sure could say the most terrifying things.
あんたたちは一体何なんですか？出てってください。
Yeah, get out of here, stalker. Kamaitachi shouted in alarm. Kayama smiled and closed the door, then addressed the Kamaitachi directly.
今さらとぼけんのはなしですせ。今この二人が持ちかけたんと同じ取引をそのまま受けてくれたらよろしいんや。ただその相手がこいつらやのうてわしらやっちゅうだけで。
Mari interrupted before the Kamaitachi had a chance to answer.
サイレンサー付きのウージーサブマシンガンなんて大層なものを持ち出して戦争でも始める気なの？モサドは。
Because as we all know, the Mossad are the only organization in existence that could possibly get their hands on Uzis. They're such rare guns. Mossad? Was that a type of Indian food?
それはサモサでしょ。
It was like she was the straight man in a comedy duo, but one who could read my mind.
モサドはイスラエル情報部のことよ。
It's really intelligence. Kayama responded with an easy grin.
イスラエルに見せかけるためにわざとウージを持ってるとは考えられまへんか？
My brain was way past being able to process any of this. Something was thrown at my feet. When I looked down, saw it was a coil of nylon rope.
それで彼女を縛り上げるのよ。
But if, like, Toru just said he never learned how to tie a knot. But he's been wearing slip-on shoes his entire life and he just never needed to. What would you do then, huh?
僕が？
そうよ。後で調べるから手を抜いたら痛い目に遭うのを覚悟しなさい。
Man, getting kidnapped by super spies at gunpoint is such a pain. Ugh. Mondays, am I right? Honestly. As I mumbled under my breath, Haruko's eyes flashed.
そうね。膝を打ち抜くなんてのは楽しいかもしれないわね。それとも。
Shoot him in the kneecap, or maybe shoot him in the other kneecap. Ooh, delightfully devilish, Haruko. I never got to hear the second option. Because suddenly the bathroom door flew open and a shadowy figure jumped out. As Haruko struggled with this unknown assailant, her machine gun fell to the floor with a clatter. By the time it occurred to me to pick it up, someone else had grabbed it and was pointing it at us again.
さっきはよくも騙してくれたわね。
Looking up from the floor, I saw it was none other than Akiko Amura. And she had her hat back. Guess she finally found out who took it. She glared at us. And the person pinning Mrs. Kai to the floor, Keiko Kitano, of course. But weren't they supposed to be locked up in my bathroom and also asleep? Man, everyone here sucks so hard. Whatever the chain of events, it was clear those two weren't here to save us.
どうやって？
Aki Kawamura left scornfully.
ドアを外から細工したみたいだったけど、運のいいことにバスルームの天井裏は隣とつながってたのよ。
God, it was foreshadowing for a completely different ending. It was weird they brought that up. So, the two of them had traveled through the ceiling.
一体何がどうなってるんだ。
Can I be to think this guy isn't really a spy? Everyone turned to look at the source of the panicked cry. It was the Kamaitachi. Tanaka was cowering in the space between the wall and his bed.
あれがかまいたちなの？ずいぶん頼りなさそうなやつだね。
Kitano, back on her feet after having just dispatched with Haruko, seemed dubious. The other woman lay sprawled on the floor. She didn't seem dead, for Kayama came over and gently scooped her up in his arms.
とにかく彼を連れて早くここを出ましょう。部屋に戻って迎えを呼んでちょうだい。私はここで連中を見張ってるわ。
Aki Kawamura kept that machine gun trained on us as Keiko Kitano hurried from the room. Extraction. Yeah, I probably should call my dentist at some point. I haven't had a checkup in a while. It made sense that they'd have backup waiting nearby. It looked like the Kamaitachi was about to fall into French hands. To be honest, I didn't care what happened to the Kamaitachi so long as it involved me getting out of this room alive. Mari had her own ideas on how things should play out, however. She spoke to Aki through clenched teeth.
ここから出られると思ったら大間違いよ。へえ、あなたに私たちを止められるとでも言うの？
She goes, no. But he can, and then Mikimoto jumps out of the closet, takes the gun from her, but then he tries to steal the Kamaitachi at gunpoint. Aki Kawamura snickered.
無線で一声連絡するだけで SDSA の精鋭部隊が駆けつけるのよ。 JCIA だか内閣調査室だかが100人かかったって相手にもならしないわ。
The JCIA, is it? I mean, it's evocative, if not particularly creative. It was frustrating, but true. Mari bit her lip and kept quiet.
連絡がつけばね。
A voice came from the other side of the door. Aki Kawamura pointed her machine gun at Kayama and motioned for him to open the door. Reluctantly, he complied. And there stood Keiko Kitano, with a pistol to her temple. Standing right behind her holding said pistol was Midori. This is rapidly spiraling out of control.
マリー、早くその物騒なものを取り上げるのよ。おっとおじさん、あんたも動かないで。
Kayama, who had already started inching towards Aki Kawamura's machine gun, clicked his tongue in frustration. Mari quickly relieved Aki Kawamura of her weapon, then positioned herself in the corner of the room so she could aim at anyone. Alright, who do we not have yet? We've got Mikimoto, still hasn't shown up. Toshio. The director, who's going by Kobayashi, still hasn't shown up yet. It really does come down to how long you stall, really. I decided to do as Mari said, as if I really had a choice. It wasn't my finest performance, but hey.
言ってくれますね。
嫌だ、みんな出ていけ。 ここは私の部屋なんだ。警察に訴えるぞ。
Even if it was all an act, this is a strange thing to say. I didn't have time to worry about it.
トール、早くして。
死にたくなかったら一緒に来るんだ。
When I put it to him plainly, Tanaka got to his feet and followed me into the hallway without further panic, or complaint, or grousing or griping, or whinging or whining. Mari backed out of the room, keeping her machine gun trained on the group. Then Midori shoved Keiko Kitano inside and slammed the door shut.
ここは私が見張っておくわ。下へ行ってボスを探してちょうだい。
Mari nodded and traded her machine gun for Midori's pistol. Then Mari and I walked down the hallway, keeping Tanaka between us at all times. The lodge was clearly riddled with spies, most of whom were penned up in Tanaka's room at the moment. The only outlier was Mikimoto, the CIA operative who was currently out cold in my closet. Or so we've been led to believe. In other words, the only people free to move about the lodge right now were all on our side, unless they were double agents. Suddenly I felt myself start to breathe a little easier. I knew it was impossible, but I felt like I'd been holding my breath for the past 5 minutes. I mean, it's not impossible. Guybrush can hold his breath for at least 8. We went down the stairs, made a turn, and headed for the back of the building. That's where the living quarters for Midori, the Kobayashis, and the rest of the staff were.
小林さんいるかな。
京子さんはいるはずだから、なんとかなるでしょう。
So that must mean Kyoko, the woman playing Kobayashi's wife, was second in command. Mari knocked on what I assumed was the Kobayashi's door. But nobody came. She put her hands on the knob. I figured it would have been locked, but it swung open easily. I could see the couple's kitchenette through the doorway.
変ね。おじさん、京子さんもいないの？
Even though she's admitted he's not really her uncle, she still keeps calling Kobayashi Oji-san. That's interesting. There was no reply. Took another look around, then cautiously entered the room. I suddenly felt a presence and turned to find Toshio standing there.
あ、敏夫さん。小林さんか京子さん知らない？
見てない。そいつがかまいたちなのか。
Okay, but how do you know that if you weren't present for what just happened? Or anything else that's happened today, for that matter. Where were you? Toshio gave Tanaka an appraising look. How much is he worth? $100, 200. If we get him restored, will the value go up, or is he more of a historical piece?
違う。かまいたちなんて私は知らない。
Tanaka denied it before Mari had a chance to even answer.
とぼけてるのよ。彼がかまいたちよ。間違いないわ。
だろうな。じゃあ僕は彼をここから連れ出すよ。
あなたが？
Mari looked at him uneasily.
そうすることになってたんだ。ボスが決めた。
Is that a fact?
聞いてなかったわ。
Toshio shrugged.
だろうな。ま、とにかく一刻を争うことだ。2階の連中はあんたと緑に任せる。
Okay, please somebody notice this. You are driving me crazy. Toshio put his hand on Tanaka's arm.
待って。
Mari gently put her hand atop his.
指示もないのに、うかつに外へ出るのは危険よ。
He chuckled silently.
大丈夫さ。ちゃんと安全なルートが確保してある。さ、こっちへ。
Toshio took Tanaka and left the room. Odd. Was there something off about the way he was dressed? If he's going outside. His clothes were way too light for venturing outside in a blizzard.
マリ、変だよ。
I quickly whispered my misgivings in her ear. Her face went pale. Toshio was about to open the back door and drag Tanaka out into the snowstorm.
止まりなさい。
For Mari's neutral special, she wields a gun. Before I knew what was happening, Mari had raised her pistol and was aiming it at Toshio's back. Toshio turned around slowly, the expression on his face not changing one bit.
おいおい、何の真似だよ。
Mari ignored his question and turned to me instead.
トール、悪いけど部屋の中をもっとよく調べてきてくれないかしら。
部屋？誰の部屋だよ。
まずさっきの小林さんたちの部屋、それから敏夫さんの部屋も。
Toshio's expression finally changed.
おい、冗談もいい加減にしろよ。
冗談じゃないわ。じっとしてて。
Does this look like a fucking joke to you? That gun is very square. Looks like it was modeled on a PS1. I had been looking at them both in bewilderment, but when I saw the serious look on Mari's face, I made up my mind. I believed in Mari. I believe in Mari Dent. I hurried back to the Kobayashi's quarters. The main living area was right off the kitchenette. It was a little larger than one of the guest rooms, with space not only for a bed, but a bookshelf and a stereo. But even after opening the closet and searching all the shadows, I couldn't find anything.
やっぱりいないよ。
I called out to Mari from across the hallway.
もっとよく調べて。
Mari shouted back to me. As I listened to her voice, I suddenly realized I hadn't checked the bathroom. What is it with keeping stuff in bathrooms? You know people have to use these at some point, right? Like, what are you gonna do when every bathroom in the building is stuffed with a corpse? Have any of you even thought that far ahead? The second I opened the bathroom door, a black mass jumped out at me. It had apparently been leaning up against the door, but tumbled forward once I turned the knob. When I took a second look, I saw it was Adri Kobayashi's wife, Kyoko. She was sprawled out on the floor, arms spread, staring up at me with empty, lifeless eyes. Her throat had been slit wide open, just like Kanaka Watase's.
マリー、大変だ。奥さんが死んでる。
Mari backed into the room and cast a quick sideways glance at the body, lying on the floor. I knew it. I knew it. I mean, it was based on your deductions. I've been just kind of bungling everything this whole time, but I knew it. From her tone, it seemed she'd suspected as much.
京子さんが死んでるのか。
I heard Toshio's voice from outside of the room.
とぼけないで。あなたがやったんでしょう。
入ってもいいか。
His voice was thick with emotion. Mari hesitated a moment, then stepped aside and let him through. Toshio took one look at the corpse on the floor, then his face tightened with grief.
ひどい。なんてことを。
白々しい芝居はもうやめて。
Mari had clearly decided that Toshio was responsible.
待てよ。小林さんは一体どこに行ったんだ？
Mari and Toshio looked at each other for a moment, neither having asked themselves this incredibly obvious question.
まさかボスが？
I could see the hesitation on Mari's face.
中は調べたのか？
I shook my head. Toshio stepped over Kyoko's body, started looking around the bathroom. However, there was no sign of Kobayashi, or any other dead bodies. Next, he crouched over the corpse and started examining the wound.
トール君、今朝殺された女の傷はどんなだった？
これとよく似てた。似てました。
かまいたちって字が残されてたんだな。
ええ。
I glanced up at the door and saw Tanaka peeking in. He was staring at Kyoko's sprawled out body with obvious unease. Mari looked up at him.
まさかかまいたちがやったなんて言うつもりじゃないでしょうね。
Toshio shook his head.
そんなつもりはないさ。だいたいかまいたちが誰か分かってないからこそ彼女はトール君の部屋へ行ったわけだろう。誰に殺されたにせよ彼女がかまいたちなんて書き残すわけがない。
Yep, that's the first thing I asked. It was a reasonable assumption.
じゃあこういうことね。かまいたちではない誰かがフランス側の人間と京子さんを殺した。ここまでは同意見かしら。
Makes sense. Toshio nodded.
そしてその誰かはあなたではない。
I mean, it's plausible enough.
断じて違うね。
Little by little, Mari seemed to be shedding her doubts about Toshio. But if it hadn't been Toshio, then who'd killed Kaneko Watase and Kyoko? Kyoko doesn't have the dignity of a last name. Was it Kobayashi, the man who was the supposed director of this whole operation? Or was it one of the people upstairs? And whoever the culprit was, the one big question was why?
何するんですか？
Suddenly, I heard shouting from down the hallway. Tanaka. I got a glimpse of his coat disappearing around the corner.
いけない。
Toshio leapt into action. He did a strange dance. They finally perfected the funky chicken wood device. Now they can end the next day since I heard a mechanical sound. Kind of like a sewing machine. And Toshio's body did this strange dance. He put his left hand in, then he put his left hand out. He put it back in. It was extremely bizarre. Something splashed on my cheek. When the noise finally stopped, Toshio collapsed in the hallway. I touched my cheek and my fingers came away bloody. No, it wasn't just my face. The walls, the door, even Mari's clothes. They were all splattered with blood.
トシオさん。
Yeah, sure, let's run directly into the line of fire. I see no possible... No, we gotta... I cautiously peeked out through the doorway.
ダメ。
Man, you got a lot of ammo in that thing. Like seriously, there's so many bullets. Are you even keeping all that? Just Going on along. Just a rat-tat-tat. Rat-a-tat-tat, rat-a-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat. If we just stay here long enough, he will eventually run out of ammo, right? That's how that works. No. Okay. Mario grabbed my arm and yanked me back. Put me back in, Chief! Put me back in! I heard that sewing machine sound again. Holes suddenly opened up in the floor, and splinters of wood went flying. I lost my balance and fell back onto my butt. Just before I did, however, I caught a glimpse of something through the doorway. Midori, shooting at us wildly with her Uzi. Now shooting, Tex.
みどりさんが
I mumbled to myself in shock.
みどりさんだったの。かまいたちはどうしてる？
引っ張って連れて行こうとしてるみたいだった。マシンガンを持って。あれで敏夫さんを。
Toshio lay in a heap on the floor, blood streaming from wounds all over his body. He was still alive, but barely. I could hear the faint sound of his breathing.
一体どうなってるんだよ、マリー。
確かに言えるのは、みどりさんがダブルスパイだったってことよ。
So in Japanese, they don't say double agent, they say double spy. Which is hilarious to me for some reason.
ダブルスパイ。
初めからどこかの国に雇われてたのか、それとも金に目がくらんで裏切ったのか。いずれにしても、かまいたちを敵側に売るつもりなのは間違いないわ。
It's the 90s. Who is the enemy in this context? I cautiously advanced to the bend in the hallway, crouched down, and looked around the corner. I mean, the Soviets are gone. 9/11 hasn't happened yet. Who are you so desperate to get one up over on? Greedy pigs.
いないわ。外へ出たのかしら。
Mario went back to Toshio and lifted his body, checking his wounds. So are we ever gonna find out why he didn't put on any pants, or,
しっかりして。
Toshio opened his eyes and shook his head weakly. His lips moved, but I couldn't hear his voice. And at last, his head lolled off to the side. Lol. He's dead now. Apparently that had been his dying breath. Neither Mari nor I said a word. We just stared at Toshio's body for a short while. Eventually Mari looked up at me.
トール。
What, not got the budget for that one line? Is that the exact moment you ran dry? I see how it is.
何？
力になってくれる？
I didn't answer at first. It was only natural, given that I'd just seen a man gunned down before my eyes. I didn't want to suffer a similar bullet-riddled fate. You know, I used to play double bass for bullet-riddled fate. But I also felt rising anger at a person who could so callously kill someone like this. After some hesitation, I finally answered. You know, honestly, this doesn't concern me in any way. Mari has been exploiting us this whole time. For absolutely no reward. I can't say I'm particularly fond of her. I'm sure Mita's going to, like, shoot us in the back to, like, stop us from having seen her face or anything. But this is honestly where my heart is right now.
悪いけど、 僕はまだ死にたくないよ。
I couldn't look her in the eye as I said this. Mara gave me a sad little smile.
そうよね。こんなところで訳もわからないまま犬みたいに撃ち殺されるなんて嫌よね。
So what, you have of shooting dogs now too? God damn it, is there any line you won't cross?
わかったわ。トールはどこかの部屋でじっとしてて。ベッドや何かで絶対ドアを開けられないようにして。必ず戻ってくるから、それまで待ってて。いいわね。
マリ、僕と一緒に逃げよう。
私には義務があるの。心配しないで。プロを信用しなさい。
She stood and smiled.
マリ！
I called out after her, but she didn't turn around. She just ran out the back door and disappeared into the blizzard. I felt like I'd made a choice I could never take back. What else could I have done? I was just a carefree college student with absolutely no combat training whatsoever. I hadn't made the wrong choice, I told myself as I went upstairs. I hadn't made the wrong choice. There was a chance Mikimoto might still be in my room, so I decided to barricade myself in Mari's instead. I locked the door and pushed one of the beds in front of it. I closed the curtain and turned off the lights. Then I crawled into the other bed and waited. About 5 minutes later... I thought I heard the sound of gunfire in the wind. It sounded like a machine gun. Maybe I was just imagining things. An hour passed. Then 2. Mari would come back to me. Holding on to that hope, I kept waiting. And hey, we didn't die. I consider this a good ending. I don't know about you all. I mean, that was in fact the only thing holding us back. What, do you expect me to throw my life away for someone who's done literally nothing for me this whole time? Come on. Get some standards. I mean, let's get some little skippy skips out of the way. So I had to pursue it any further. I started thinking some more about this Kamaitachi thing. I heard the word somewhere before. It's a natural phenomenon. But did the note mean when it said the Kamaitachi comes tonight? Maybe it was a weather forecast or something? You know, a secret haunted weather forecast, obviously. Tonight will be snowy with a 100% chance of weasel-infested whirlwinds. Nah, I'd never seen a Kamaitachi mentioned in any sort of weather report before. There we go. Now, we know Kaneko is in on it, so let's ask her. I mean, they're all in on it, we know that now. I decided to ask Kaneko.
ねえ、君たちの部屋の近くって誰が泊まってるかわかる？
近く？さあ、わかんないわ。気にしてないもの。アキ、知ってる？私たちの近く？
おにぎり？そりゃありがとう。
Alright, good talk. Good talk. For completion's sake...
ねえ、君たちの部屋の近くって誰が泊まってるかわかる？
Gee, sister, I don't know. Maybe you should ask Aki. I thought I'd asked her politely, but she looked away and wouldn't answer. Maybe she suffered from crippling shyness? I had no choice but to ask her friend Aki the same question. Why not even going to give us the chance to talk to Keiko instead? Come on. Really? Said to give it for now. Still had tomorrow. With that in mind, I took a quick shower, flipped off the lights, and went to sleep.
いや
本当
楽しむ
とぼけちゃって決まってるじゃない。
So did you just have this dress, like, in your bag when you showed up, just on the in case? Because that's honestly the most forethought anyone's put in this thus far, so... I guess that's somewhat impressive. Comparably. Anyway, why didn't the Kamaitachi just write a tell-all memoir?
手記でも書く
I laughed out loud.
なかなか面白いものができるかもしれないわね。でもそんなことよりもっといい方法があるわ。
So you're not denying he could have just gotten away with it?
その告白式を出版社じゃなくどこかの国に売るのよ。かまいたちがこれまで手に入れた在日米軍や自衛隊に関する情報を喉から手が出るほど欲しがってる国はたくさんあるわ。
Is that how it works? Right there, we have it now. Again, we can just
だから問題なのよ。
clear this last option
新
out.
しい雇い主を探す
そうよ。長い間東側のために働いてきたかまいたちは米ソの緊張が緩んだ今でさえ重要な情報を数を中には自衛隊や在日米軍に関する重要機密も含まれているでしょう。そういった情報を手に入れるためなら
So did the Kamaitachi specially activate in Japan? Is that like the implication here? Because, you know, his code name is Kamaitachi and all. Guess that's the sensible option. Got into bed, closed my eyes, and started counting sheep. 1 sheep, 2 sheep, red sheep, blue sheep. Did y'all catch that episode of Detective Conan with the pretty recent one, the anime original with the red sheep costume? That thing was horrifying. Like, everything else about that case was completely forgettable, but that thing was straight out of the Uncanny Valley. Like, seriously. Color of blood with eyes aren't shaped like anything. God above. Damn it, I couldn't sleep with the lights on. But I was too afraid to go turn them off. After counting 9,215 sheep with only a few seconds of nodding off to show for it, I decided I couldn't take it anymore and went downstairs. Coming in from downstairs. Leaf through the mag.
夕べなら会いましたけどね
I looked at the 2 remaining girls. If they were both in on it, then they'd know Kanako would come into my room last night. I figured it'd be a bad idea to try and hide it.
何か話したいことがあって僕の部屋に来たみたいだったんですけど眠かったんで明日にしてくださいって言ったんです
何時頃ですか？
Aki pressed me for more details.
部屋に戻ってちょっとうとうとしてからだから12時くらいかな
その後はお会いにはなってないんですね。
She tried to nail me down.
ええ自分の部屋に戻ったんだと思ってましたけど戻らなかったんですか
I knew she couldn't have gone back, of course. The 2 girls shook their heads ambiguously.
どうもお騒がせしました。
Right, good talk, good talk, good talk, good talk.
あんたこそ何者だ
I tried to sound as intimidating as possible.
こっちが先に質問してるんだ。
Actually, I think I'll be the one asking the questions here. Ah, darn it. How did you know my one weakness? He twisted my arm even harder.
やめてください。僕は関係ないんです。
何と関係がないんだ。
Damn it. So much for playing dumb. No, Toto, you don't need to play with me.
どこに雇われてる？素直に吐けよ。そうすりゃ痛い目を見ずに済む。俺はいろんな拷問を知ってるんだぜ。
I'm gonna right into it. There are only so many ways to hurt a person. Everything beyond that is just choice of location.
どこにも雇われてなんかない。
爪と指の間に焼いた竹串を突き刺すってのはどうだ。指先ってのは神経が集まってるからな。いじめるには一番さ。
I would point out that torture is totally useless for retrieving useful information, but honestly, I don't think he particularly cares. Just imagining it made my fingertips itch.
指じゃなきゃ歯かな。歯を一本一本抜いてやる。もちろん麻酔なしでだ。全部抜くまでには口中血だらけだろうが、それだけじゃない。むき出しになった神経を用事でほじくり出してやる。
Well then, am I gonna answer the questions, huh, genius? You think that far ahead, huh?
何でも言うよ。何でも言うから。
いい子だ。まず、どこに雇われてるか言うんだ。フランスか、それとも。
Alright. Well, that was embarrassing.
お前、
What if we just completely screw it at the very
ただの学
beginning?
生です。スパイなんかじゃないですよ。
はあ、そうか。スパイじゃないのか。なら関係ないな。
ねえ、そうです。関係ないんです。
って信じるわけねえだろ。スパイじゃないなんてわざわざ言うやつがどこにいるんだ。
He mashed my face against the floor.
本当なんです。本当にスパイじゃないんです。僕は間違われただけなんです。
間違われた。誰に？どう間違われたんだ？
The questions came one after another.
フランス情報部の女にかまいたちだと思われたらしくて。
In my nervousness, the words came spilling out of me.
それで
彼女は色仕掛けて僕に自白剤を飲ませたんですが、僕が気がついた時には彼女は喉を切られて死んでて、でも小林さんたちは警察は呼んじゃいけないって。
Mikimoto's weight on my back suddenly grew heavier.
苦しいです。正直に話してるんだからどいてくださいよ。
I heard a voice. It wasn't Mikimoto's.
男のおしゃべりは嫌われるわよ。
マリー。
だらしないわね。男の。
そりゃ。
I was actually more worried about myself than Mari, but I didn't want to come right out and say that. But really, who would be concerned at her at this point?
縛ってバスルームにでも。ああ、ダメか。クローゼットに入れときましょう。
Wait, shit, we already have a body in the closet. Dang it. That shows what I know. Working quickly. I had to go AFK for a while and do a bunch of stuff. What happened? We told Mari she could go screw herself. And then the game gave it an ending, and I think it was supposed to be bad, but we didn't die, so I'm really not sure what the problem was supposed to be. Now we're just catching up to where we were earlier. Let's try to reason with the people. I tried to reason with her, hoping to clear any misunderstanding. Going on, Jesus, tell me, how long were you gone? I even specifically praised this DJ, because I thought it was cool. Anyway, the short version is that literally everyone is a spy. Which means that no one is a spy, except ironically, I'm pretty sure Tanaka. I'm pretty sure Tanaka is not a spy. But everybody's like accusing him of being the Kamaitachi just via process of elimination. Mari was desperately grabbing at Aki Kawamura's hand, struggling to push the ice pick away from her face.
違うんだ。彼女をやったのは僕たちじゃないんだ。
I shouted this at her, from a distance of course. Just then I heard a noise at my back. Someone had been hiding behind the bed. By the time I turned around, it was already too late. There was some sort of thread wrapped around my neck. It was thin piano wire, though giving the colorization it looks more like a fishing line.
全部終わったら彼女を弔ってやってくれる？
Alright, there's that. We're almost back where we were last time. Let's not worry. I jumped on Aki Kawamura, trying to pin her arms behind her back. It was a close call, but I was able to get Aki into a Nelson just before she swung the ice pick at Mari's head.
やめろ。彼女を殺したのは僕たちじゃない。
Then I heard a noise at my back. There we go.
僕はここに残るよ。
そう。じゃあ後のことはお願いね。
Mari nodded and left with Midori, closing the door behind her. Oh, this is interesting. I waited for the sound of their footsteps going downstairs, then I opened the bathroom door.
さあ、今のうちに。
But as the two girls started to emerge, there was another knock at the door. I quickly closed up the bathroom again.
どなたですか？
ちょっとお尋ねしたいんですが。
Okay, now you're trying to be evasive here, but like, come on, there's only so many women left in the entire building. Is this like a Mikimoto case where this is just like a free answer for those of you who are struggling? Because I don't know why you'd need that in a case where you don't actually get to accuse anybody. It was a frail female voice. Unsure who it could be, I opened the door and saw Mrs. Kayama standing there.
なんでしょう。
実は
She held out her right hand. Was she trying to give me something? I looked down and saw what looked like a large lighter in her hand. It wasn't a lighter. It was a pistol so small it could comfortably fit inside a man's closed fist. She's like 10% of the way to holding a gangsta style. You're like a little cool, that's all.
声を上げないで。
Okay. She jammed the muzzle of the pistol into the center of my chest, then advanced into the room. I took a couple of steps backwards and raised my hands into the air. Mrs. Kayama closed the door behind her.
一体何の真似ですか？
How many guns did you bring anyway? Are you spies or are you planning to start a war? Oh, they actually made a sprite for this. You missed it earlier. Earlier she was holding a different type of gun and they had a separate sprite sheet for it and everything.
分かってるくせに。
No, I don't. That's why I asked. She said this with a terrifying smile on her face.
僕は何も知りませんよ。何も関係ないんです。本当です。
Oh. And I realized I'd struck my foot in my mouth once again.
へえ、何に関係ないのかしら。
You know, for being the case where everyone is supposed to be like trained espionage agents, I've mentioned this multiple times already. Literally everyone here is extremely dumb.
いや、それはその。
あなたまさかかまいたちじゃないわよね。誰のために働いてるの？
Haruko was another of the Kamaitachi hunters. My brain sped past surprised and went straight to shocked. Her nose twitched. I don't know, is it? Keeping the pistol trained on me, she cautiously advanced deeper into the room. Eventually, she found the bloodstain. She kept pushing me with her pistol until I fell backwards onto the bed. If Dr. Midori was a trained spy too, I wouldn't, for it requires too much going outside. I burn far too easily, and also I hate people, and I wish they would all just go away. I couldn't bear being thought of as a murderer, so I raised my voice in my own defense. There's no need to get so worked up about it, you big baby. I'm just holding you at gunpoint. I guess we'll go away. Yeah, get out of here, stalker. Her gaze wandered around the room until it settled on the closet. Oh, but you all stop that. God. Get a second joke, Jesus. I broke out into a cold sweat. What could I do? She walked across the room, keeping her eyes on me, then reached out for the closet curtain. Next instant, the room door burst open, and Mari jumped in. Mari froze when she saw the pistol pointed at her. She looked like she couldn't believe her eyes. For a few moments, the pistol swung between the two of us. Well, we're not dead yet. I guess that counts for something. Hey, timing. I collapsed to the floor, feeling like I'd been pierced by a red-hot skewer. Had I just been... I pressed a hand to my chest. Something hot was spilling through my fingers. Was this my... blood? I lay back on the floor, listening to the sounds of the other two fighting. I started to feel very sleepy. Oh, stop pretending you care now. I heard Mari calling out to me. Is Mari crying? Okay, Tora, you've seen you can do this on command, man. Come on. She said she'd brought me here merely as camouflage. If I died, that should have been okay with her as long as she accomplished her mission. Are you crying for me, Mari? I moved my lips to say the words, but no sounds came out. Just before I closed my eyes and let myself drift off to sleep, I felt teardrops start to fall on my cheek. They were like a warm spring rain. Okay, come on, finish your goddamn sentence. You're supposed to be a protagonist here. Honestly, what a disappointment. Alright, back in. I thought about making a grab at the gun, but I didn't have the courage for something so risky. Mrs. Kayama grinned wickedly as she asked Mari this.
トール、一体どういうことなの？この人何？
See? She'll cry if you, like, need to be manipulated, but she hurls abuse at you every time you do anything. She's not a good match for you, man, I'm sorry. Mari, screaming hysterically, took a few steps forward.
動かないで。怪我をするわよ。
Mari ignored her.
何よ、モデルガンなんか持ってバカみたい。トール、まさか私ってものがありながらこんな年増と浮気してたんじゃないでしょうね。
As she talked, Mari drew closer to me.
何言ってんだよ。浮気だって。
Mari stood in front of us, alternately glaring at Haruko and me.
モデルガンなんかじゃないわよ。それ以上近づかないで。
Haruko seemed bewildered by this turn of events, perhaps even slightly spooked. Spooked. She didn't want to fire her pistol. Of course she didn't. She couldn't afford to cause a scene. Then why the hell is everybody picking fights with everybody else? No part of this route makes any sense in light of concept. This is embarrassing. I snickered as she approached Haruko.
火遊びもいいけど、年相応の相手を選んでよね。だいたい。
The next instant, Mari's body spun into action. Simultaneously, something that sounded like a firecracker went off. I had no idea what had just happened. Haruko was cowering on the floor, holding her wrist. A pistol was nowhere to be seen. It seemed Mari had launched an unstoppable roundhouse kick at her. How did she pull that off so quickly? But about that rush of wind, I felt something trickle down my face. I touched it with my finger. Blood. Is that what they're calling it now? A bullet had grazed my cheek, drawing blood.
トール、大丈夫？
Mari looked at me with concern.
ああ、かすり傷だよ。
'Tis but a scratch. Scratch your arms off. No, it isn't. I answered her with a laugh. And then I fainted. The next thing I knew, I was lying on the bed and Mari was staring down at me.
気がついたのね。よかった。
Man, we were just trying to cross the border, too.
彼女は加山さんの奥さんは。
あそこに入っていてもらうことにしたわ。
Man, we just have a body in every single compartment in this room. The hell? She tilted her head towards the closet. What, is she sharing a room with Mikimoto? Was there space for that?
でもあそこには。
大丈夫よ。二人とも気絶してるから。
What the hell? I now had 2 unconscious spies in my closet, and a corpse with a slit throat in my bathroom. There's also a body in the bathroom downstairs, too. What are we gonna do if somebody actually needs to pee?
そういや、バスルームの2人は帰った。
まさか、かまいたちが誰か分かったってのに自由にするわけないでしょ。
どういうこと？
I jumped up in alarm.
ドアの隙間から催眠ガスを送り込んで眠らせてあるの。ドアも細工で開かないようにしたし、あとはかまいたちを捕まえるだけよ。
捕まえるだけって言ったって、一体誰なんだ？
Mari looked at me like I was missing a few screws.
加山夫妻もかまいたちじゃなかった以上、残ってるのはあの田中って人だけでしょ。
そりゃ確かにそうだけど。
But he's also very obviously not a spy, because a spy would never dress that much like a spy.
みんなが眠ってる今のうちにかまいたちをこっちのものにしてしまうのよ。さあ行きましょう。
Shh. Be very, very quiet. I'm hunting Kamaitachi. Meh. Maya grabbed my hand and pulled me out of the room.
そういや小林さんは見つかったの？探してたんじゃなかったっけ？
Maya's expression stiffened.
見つからないわ。何か良くないことがあったみたい。
So he's nowhere in the entire building?
良くないことって。
It's interesting. I didn't say another word. Best not to imagine the worst at this point. Most of his enemies were knocked out in my room, and he had plenty of allies. People like Toshio, Midori, Kyoko, all of whom are perfectly trustworthy, as we know. Even if Kobayashi wasn't here right now, that didn't mean there was anything to worry about. Mari must have thought likewise, since she marched right over to Tanaka's door and started knocking.
Hi.
Voice that opened didn't seem particularly wary. I think we've reunited. Okay. We're back on the same route now. So, to sum up, we go in, confront him, the Kayamas come in, everyone comes in. I'll take a branch here. Literally everyone we just knocked out just kind of gets up immediately. I played it tough. I grabbed Tanaka's arm and tried to yank him from his hiding spot by the bed. Ignoring his protests, I dragged him around Midori and into the hallway. Mari backed out of the room, keeping machine gun trained on the group. Now, everyone except for Mikimoto, who was unconscious in our closet, the two girls who are... Now, both the two girls went in. Literally everyone except Mikimoto and the staff are now all locked in this one room. And Midori shoved Keiko Kitano inside and slammed the door shut. I'm kind of upset you weren't there for, because that scene was absolutely ridiculous. It's like the Kayamas come in holding us at machine gun points. Then Keiko comes in, knocks her unconscious, and picks up the gun. And Mari comes in. Then Midori comes in and holds them at good point. It would be funny if it weren't so incredibly self-serious. Anyway, then we went downstairs, ran into Toshio. And there was something weird. Wasn't it weird for them to be leaving through the back door like that? It was strange, right? Just as I was thinking that, Mari started chasing after Toshio and Tanaka.
Oi, Mari!
I followed, close behind. The two men were just about to exit through the back door when Mari pulled them up short.
Toshio-san, そんな格好じゃ二人とも凍え死ぬわよ。
Yeah, that was the thing I noticed on the cannon route. She pointed her pistol at Toshio. Toshio turned around slowly, the expression on his face not changing one bit. We open the bathroom door and find... Mrs. Kobayashi. Alright, we believe Toshio when he says he didn't do it. Since they both got their throats slit, we figure this is the same person who killed... Kanako... Which can't be the Kamaitachi because the dying message said Kamaitachi. Since Kanako didn't know who the Kamaitachi was, that message must be a forgery. Hence the person it implicates must be innocent. Tanaka's just kinda hanging around.
そんなつもりはないさ。だいたいかまいたちが誰か分かってないからこそ彼女はトール君の部屋へ行ったわけだろ。 誰に殺されたにせよ、彼女がかまいたちなんて書き残すわけがない。
It was a reasonable assumption.
じゃあそして
男女
So the question of the hour is, who is the culprit then? And why? But then suddenly, oh snap, plot progression. Suddenly, I heard shouting from down the hallway. Tanaka. I caught a glimpse of his coat disappearing around the corner. Toshio leapt into action. The next instant, I heard a mechanical sound, kind of like a sewing machine, and Toshio's body did this strange dance. Something splashed on my cheek. When the noise finally stopped, Toshio collapsed in the hallway. I touched my cheek, and my fingers came up bloody. No, it wasn't just my face. The walls, the door, even Mari's clothes. They were all splattered with blood. I see no possible way this could go wrong. I rushed over to Toshio's side. By the time I heard Mari's warning, it was already too late. The instant I went through the door, it felt like 1,000 punches hit me all at once. My god, the true culprit was Kenshiro! I should have known. That's a lot of bullets. Okay, you think you got him? Maybe, Criminy. God, show a little restraint. Wait, when do you need to reload? Criminy, this is overkill, come on. Sharp jabs and body blows rained down on me, gouging my flesh and shredding my internal organs. That guy's super dead. It was as if miniature bombs were detonating inside my body, one after another. The air was suffused with a fine red mist. The acrid scent of gunpowder filled my nostrils. I slowly collapsed atop Toshio as I heard someone wailing in grief. Was I dying? If I was dying, you'd tell me, right? Here, in the mountains, pumped full of bullets from a machine gun. And my parents and friends would never know. You have friends? It's weird. There was a moment of silence that made me feel like I was going crazy. Yep, that's my name. Don't wear it out. I heard that grief-stricken wail once more. And the sewing machine sound started up again. The sound of gunfire. Another shower of blood. And whose blood was it this time? It was the sound of a person falling. Someone gasped my name. Mary? Chill, lo-fi beats, too. See your girlfriend machine gun to death in front of you before? That's Frank Castle's favorite album, don't you know? Was it Mari? Or was it merely a clever simulacrum made to look like Mari? I'm onto you. And she tried to help me? Someone was crawling across the floor, reaching for me. Bloody hands. Bloody hands? Oh, say damn things. They'd bust your mum for a nickel. Use the last bit of my strength to reach out and hold them tight. It's actually lucid for having taken that many bullets. And the end. Alright, let's get back in and go on the proper route.
どうしよう
Cautiously peeked through the doorway. I grabbed my arm and yanked me back. I heard that sewing machine sound again. Holes suddenly opened up in the floor and splinters of wood went flying. I lost my balance and fell back onto my butt. Just before I did, however, I caught a glimpse of something through the doorway. Dun dun dun. Midori, shooting at us wildly with her Uzi.
みどりさんが
I mumbled to myself in shock.
みどりさんだったの。かまいたちはどうしてる？
引っ張って連れて行こうとしてるみたいだった。マシンガンを持って。あれで敏夫さんを。
Toshio lay in a heap on the floor, blood streaming from wounds all over his body. So does that mean you two are breaking up, or, He was still alive, but barely. I could hear the faint sound of his breathing.
一体どうなってるんだよ、マリー。
確かに言えるのは、みどりさんがダブルスパイだったってことよ。
ダブルスパイ
Double spy.
初めからどこかの国に雇われてたのか、それとも金に目がくらんで裏切ったのか。いずれにしても、かまいたちを敵側に売るつもりなのは間違いないわ。
Can you really sell an entire Kamaitachi? I mean, that is illegal in most countries. Mari cautiously advanced to the bend in the hallway, crouched down, and looked around the corner.
いないわ。外へ出たのかしら。
Mari went back to Toshio and lifted his body, checking his wounds.
しっかりして。
Gare, Toshio-kun. We all believe in you. Toshio opened his eyes, and shook his head weakly. His lips moved, but I couldn't hear his voice. Then at last, his head lolled off to the side. Apparently that had been his dying breath. Neither Mari nor I said a word. We just stared at Toshio's body for a short while. Eventually, Mari looked up at me.
何
力になってくれる？
I didn't answer at first. It was only natural given that I'd just seen a man gunned down before my very eyes. I didn't want to suffer a similar bullet-riddled fate. But I also felt rising anger at a person who could so callously kill someone like this. After some hesitation, I finally answered. If we just say we don't want to go along with it, nothing bad really happens to us. I mean, Mari probably dies, but you know, what have you done for us on this timeline? Well, we saw that ending before, so if you want to get our completionism out, we should contribute something. Story time Don John, hello, thank you for following. I'm certainly suspicious enough to warrant. Welcome to Kamaitachi no Yoru. This is a remake of an extremely old classic mystery game that's primarily well known for having tons of endings that like aren't canon to each other at all. Like right now we're doing the storyline where we go down the path of like the whole thing being a spy drama and the answer having to do with intentional espionage and stuff. Previously on other playthroughs, we've gotten endings where it was a purely traditional fair play whodunit. And we all got to, you know, get away with figuring out a false alibi. There was an ending where the answer was ghosts, and we had to put a vengeful spirit to rest. There was an ending where the answer was that we found out we were fictional characters. It was quite a bit. I don't know what the hell is happening at any given moment. So we're all learning together. Right now we are at the climax of the espionage route. So we're about to go confront the double agent, who is of course the only person you're ever really allowed to portray as a villain. Because being a traitor is more important than who you're betraying. I didn't care about this war between spies. Japanese, American, the sides didn't matter. I was driven only by my hatred of Midori. Just then, we heard the sound of an engine outside the window. Awful convenient we didn't hear that last time. She's making a break for it! I scrambled to her feet. Then she opened the door of a nearby room and hurried inside. I had no clue what she was doing. Mari doko? When I tried to follow her, she popped back out and shoved a heavy down jacket into my hands. Jeez, it's the cops! They rushed me down the hallway, my jacket still hanging off one of my arms. We ran to the front door and put on our outdoor shoes. The moment I stepped outside the lodge, the freezing wind and snow cut through me like a knife. Oh, you mean like what happened to Kaneko and Mrs. Kobayashi? Because they got cut pretty deep. Just then I saw a snowmobile emerge from behind the building and drive off into the blizzard. I couldn't tell who was on it, but I knew there were two people. I shouted the question at me. No one here really knows what they're doing. Especially not you. Without giving me a chance to respond, Mari shoved her pistol into my hands and set off running. The lump of black iron was far colder and heavier than I'd imagined. Did she actually expect me to use this? In the meantime, Mari had disappeared into the blizzard. I descended the front porch steps and peered out at the wall of white. I couldn't see which way she'd gone. It was probably just not to proceed blindly. As I was wrestling with what to do, I heard the roar of an engine, very similar to the one from earlier. Then Mari pulled up in a second snowmobile. Jet and Loser were going spying. She was wearing a ski mask, goggles, and gloves. The instant I sat down and grabbed onto Mari's back, the snowmobile went racing off into the snow. Mobile. Realm. Cameraman's been drinking again. Poor bastard, he's got a real problem. It's tearing his family apart. We shouldn't make fun of him. Addiction is a disease. The G-forces nearly peeled me off the snowmobile. It was way more acceleration than I'd expected. I was quickly grabbed at my seat in an attempt to steady myself. Floor it? No, no! Mari shouted over her shoulder. She wasn't kidding. The snowmobile went bucking across the snowdrifts like a bronco at a rodeo. The only way to keep from falling off was to hold on to Mari for dear life. I mean, grabbing by the hips is generally more standard, I suppose. I mean, I've not ridden on the back of someone else in a very long time, but I think this is the correct procedure. I threw my arms around Mari's waist and held onto her hips. However, as I tightened my grip, my crotch unavoidably began to This was bad. Very bad. I shifted my hands to her stomach so that our hips weren't in such close contact. Motherfucker, you are about to die because of your own stupidity. Please prioritize a little. The blizzard was so thick I couldn't see the road ahead of us, or even the front of our snowmobile for that matter. But Mari, undaunted, continued to accelerate. The vehicle roared along the bumpy forest path, bucking like a raging bull. Pain shot through my spine as I was slammed up and down, over and over. And though I was sheltered behind Mari, the whipping wind still had managed to freeze my face and hands in an instant. Are we there yet? Are we there? My ears ached. My fingers ached. At first they felt like they were about to fall off. But before long I didn't feel anything. Mari's shout interrupted mine. The next thing I knew, we were flying through the air. What followed was a feeling of weightlessness. It seemed to go on forever. Me too, buddy. Me too. I was so terrified the only thing I could manage to do was scream. The impact of our landing was so intense I nearly ended up with whiplash. And I came damn close to biting off my tongue. It was a miracle that Mari and I hadn't yet been thrown off by this mechanical bull of ours. Mari shouted back to me. Despite her claims, I couldn't see anything through the thick curtain of snow. But I could hear the faint roar of another engine. If we could hear them, however, I meant they could also hear us. I didn't relish the thought of suddenly getting perforated by an Uzi. As if she could sense my concern, Mari yelled to me. Is it our stunning good looks? Maybe so. But this was also the first time in my life I'd ever held a pistol. Yeah, it's like playing a video game, you know? You just click on the person you want to shoot at. And I looked up to see another snowmobile, so close to us that I thought we might collide. Rather than slowing down, Mari gunned the engine, ramming into the rear bumper of the other vehicle. A gust of wind cleared the blizzard away for a split second, and I could see Midori looking back at us, baring her teeth. The Kamaitachi was slumped over her back. Is he dead? He's dead, isn't he? No, he can't be dead. Then how are we going to question him and find out that we've been fighting over nobody this whole time? He seems to be unconscious. Mari slowed down, and we immediately lost sight of Midori's slow snowmobile again. Snowmobile. More like slowmobile. Hey-o! The reason she'd done this, I found out, was so we could talk without being overheard. That is a big ask to make of someone in my position. Jump across? She made it sound so easy, but how did she expect me to pull that off at this speed? Alright, let's try to be reasonable here.
きるわけないよ。
じゃあ何か他にいいアイデアがあるの？
Don't I have a gun?
やるしかないのよ。
I reluctantly gave in.
いいわね。大丈夫。車体に当たりさえしなけりゃ、あとは雪が受け止めてくれるわ。
That's a pretty sizable if. With that, Mari sped up once more. It didn't take long for them to come into sight, but Midori kept speeding up, making it hard for Mari to pull alongside her. When we swerved right, Midori swerved right. When we swerved left, Midori swerved left. Neve Smurman filling in for Meave Smurman.
ちょっと揺れるわよ。そこに捕まってて。
I didn't even have a chance to ask why. Mari fainted left, then veered right as hard as she could.
雪に突っ込むぞ。
I let out a shout that was verging on a shriek. There were walls of snow on either side of us, but just before we slammed into the nearest one, Mari shifted all her weight to the left. The right ski of our snowmobile lifted off the ground. No, we don't get a CG, that's too late, that would be too easy. For a moment I was convinced we were going to tip all the way over. I closed my eyes in panic. But the right side of the snowmobile landed on the wall, and we kept moving. Looking like we were only running on one ski, our snowmobile finally forced its way alongside Midori's vehicle. As we came abreast of her, Midori looked over and gave us a wicked grin. She was gonna ram us. If we took a hit right now, our teetering snowmobile would be toast. And not the warm, delicious kind that would totally make for a good snack in the snow. Mari turned to the handlebars. Right as Mari shouted, I kicked off from my seat and launched myself into the air. A moment later, I slammed into Tanaka, and we both went tumbling into the snow. They're both dead now. That's it, that's how this storyline ends. At this point, I couldn't tell who was screaming anymore. Mari had said the snow would catch my fall, hadn't she? But after having been exposed to the merciless wind for so long, the surface of snow was like a sheet of ice. I slammed into the ground, the wind knocked right out of me. Then we both went tumbling and sliding across the road until we crashed into the opposite snowbank. My body was completely buried in snow. I couldn't get up, couldn't see a thing. A short distance away, there came a sound of a violent crash. The snowmobile had either tipped over or collided with a tree. Or maybe both. You don't know. Was it Mari's? Or Midori's? I was desperate to know, but my whole body ached from what I just endured. I doubted I could even get up. Tanaka and I were still down on the ground, groaning and clutching at our bruised heads, when I heard a venomous voice. I finally managed to look up. The blizzard had stopped. I could clearly see Midori staggering towards us. Blood was flowing from a gash in her forehead, but she still had the machine gun gripped firmly in both hands. Mari? What had happened to Mari? Noticing me looking at her, Midori stopped and pointed the muzzle of her Uzi at me. Step away from the Kamaitachi and keep your hands where I can see them. This is a stick-up. I wasn't lying. But even if I could have gotten up, I would have said the same thing. I knew the second I moved away from this man, I'd be shot dead. When in doubt, ask questions. I like knowing things. I tried to buy myself time with some questions.
みどりさん、あんたは一体どこに雇われてるんだ？
あなたは知らなくていいことよ。近くて遠い国とだけ教えといてあげるわ。
Well, we can't say who the bad guy is. They might boycott sales in that country. Obviously. A country that's near yet far? China? Or maybe North Korea?
京子さんたちを殺したのはなぜなんだ？
彼女は私を怪しみ始めてたのよ。SD 衛星への女は夜中に鉢合わせしたから仕方なかったの。
Man, I can't believe a spy was suspicious of another spy. Diabolical. She'd been killed because of a chance encounter? Wait. My pistol. There was my pistol. It should have been in the right pocket of my jacket. A quick glance down confirmed it was still there. Could I pull it out and shoot her before she shot me? I had zero confidence in that.
そいつを立ち上がらせなさい。
Midori pointed at the Kamaitachi. Tanaka was shaking his head groggily, still seeming dazed from all he'd been through. I looped my arm around him and pretended to struggle getting him upright. Then, while subtly shifting the position of my right hand so it was out of Midori's view, I pulled the pistol from my pocket. I shoved Tanaka at her, then quickly raised the pistol and took aim. Or at least that's what I'd intended to do. But the gun slipped from my hand as I held it out in front of me. Butterfingers? It went spinning across the hard snow and stopped at Midori's feet. It was the cold. I no longer had enough strength left in my frozen hands to hold a gun, much less shoot one.
おやおや、子供がこんな物騒なもの持ってちゃいけないわね。お仕置きしなくちゃね。
Naughty, naughty. Midori aimed the machine gun at my face, then laughed as she put her finger on the trigger. I stood there, paralyzed, staring at the muzzle of a gun. It was all over. I was going to die. What even was death, anyway? I mean, come on. Like, if you really think about it, isn't being dead, like, same place babies are before they're born? Whoa, did I just, like, totally blow your mind, man? Entertaining such foolish thoughts, I waited for my own death to arrive. Then came a sound, click, click, click. Down from the rooftop was old Saint Nick. Midori was frantically pulling the trigger, but no bullets were coming out. See, I told you stalling on that sequence was gonna save us in the end. Hearing Mari's voice coming from somewhere, it snapped me back to my senses. Midori, meanwhile, clicked her tongue in frustration and threw the machine gun at my head. I slipped away with my hand and a moment later felt a rush of pain travel up my arm. I didn't think I was capable of firing a pistol in this condition, so instead I launched myself directly at Midori. Perhaps I'd caught her by surprise with this move. But for whatever reason, she didn't get out of the way and we ended up colliding, head on. Applied directly to the forehead. We both went tumbling to the snow in a tangle of limbs. The person who ended up on top of the pile was Midori. As I looked up at her, there was a metallic springing sound, and a long, thin blade emerged from beneath her left sleeve. Where do they get all these wonderful toys? Turns out she's a member of the Assassin's Guild the whole time. Turns out Mari was actually working with the Templars and were trying to help her take over the world. And of course, who else could be such a colossal bitch? The tip of the icy blade was stained with dried blood. This was the same knife she'd used to slit Kyoko's and Kaneko's throats. And now, my throat as well. That's gonna be a real pain to get out of those clothes. Then bang, a gunshot, and Midori's chest burst open, sending blood splattering all over my face. Midori stared down at the hole in her chest in utter disbelief. Then, like a puppet whose strings had been cut, she collapsed sideways. That gun needs to stop smoking, it's gonna stunt its growth. Mari was on one knee, still pointing the pistol in the direction. Are you wearing ripped pants? Out in the snow? My god, are you suicidal? You're just dumb. Honestly. Seriously. Not the Sam Hill. I staggered to my feet and a sigh of relief ran to her. Oh, terribly. Don't worry about it. When I took a closer look, I could see that Mari's clothes were torn, and her face was covered in blood. Okay, so she wasn't like that organically. Okay, I guess I can maybe forgive her sins. If I'm feeling polite. You know? Know what I'm saying? Know what I'm saying? Know what I'm saying? Well, we haven't died yet despite our best efforts. Mari gave a weak grin. Just then, I heard the sound of an engine coming from the lodge. A car was approaching. It slowed down and finally stopped. I held my breath, waiting to see who was inside. The door opened, and Kobayashi emerged. Interesting indeed. Where'd you go off to? Were you calling back up? You know, we, didn't really need it in the end. Probably would have helped if you just had an extra pair of hands here. He looked at me, Mari, and the now dead Midori for a moment, then turned his gaze towards the Kamaitachi. Mari was struggling to rein in her anger. Expendable losses. Turns out the spy boss considers his subordinates expendable. Who would have imagined? Mari looked perplexed.
部内に情報を売っている人間がいるのは分かっていた。裏切り者の可能性がある人間をすべてここに集めた。かまいたちを捕まえるためと称してな。君も例外じゃない。
称して。じゃあ、かまいたちは本当の目的じゃなかったということなんですか?
I mean, what is a Kamaitachi between friends anyway?
本当も何も。かまいたちなんてものは存在しないんだよ。あれは我々が長い年月をかけて作り上げた幻想だ。
That seems like an unnecessary amount of work to catch one double agent. My god, are there no real spies you could come up with?
幻想って一体どういうことです？だってかまいたちは現に
The Kamaitachi is just an illusion, a sham, a facade. Mari at a loss for words, pointed to Tanaka.
そこで失禁してる男か？あれがかまいたちに見えるかね？あれが誰かは知らんが、かまいたちでないことは私が保証するよ。
Oh, man, that's gonna freeze your legs out here too. My condolences.
繰り返し言うが、かまいたちは我々が作り出した幻想なんだ。最初はただのギャグみたいなものだった。情報が漏れたようです。またかまいたちが出たといった風にな。
Ah, humor.
いつの頃からか、そういった幻想を育てるのも何かの役に立つことに気がついた人間がいた。内部の人間にも外部の人間にもかまいたちの存在を信じ込ませることができれば、いつかこういった形で利用できると考えたわけだ。
It's a surprise tool that will help us later.
実際、その効果は予想以上だった。裏切り者を発見し、おまけに各国のスパイ連中を一網打尽にしたんだからな。
Yeah, sure, a lot of people died, and basically none of these spies are going to amount to anything. But, you know, it's the thought that counts. Mari sank back down to her knees, her arms disappearing into the snow. Kobayashi continued on brightly.
しかし君は驚くほどの活躍を見せてくれたな。いなくなった二人の穴埋めは十分にやってくれそうだ。
Yep. You lose two people. Two people's workloads get added to you, and you don't get a raise to compensate. Sounds pretty normal to me.
ひどい。みんなを騙してたくさんの人が死んだっていうのに。
Four people, including two from the other side, had been killed in an effort to uncover one traitor. But Kobayashi didn't seem to think that was too high a price to pay.
そうそう、トール君だったな。君も素人にしてはよく頑張った。少し訓練を受ければ、すぐにお国のために働けるぞ。どうだ？悪い話じゃないだろう。
There was a sharp crack, and Kobayashi fell flat on his ass in the snow. Mario and I had punched him in the face at the exact same time. I looked down at my fist in disbelief. It had been flying through the air before I'd even decided to hit him. Mario had apparently had the same reaction as me. We both started laughing. Four people are still dead.
貴様ら、何のつもりだ？こんなことをしてただで済むと思ってるのか？
Unperturbed, Mari strolled past Kobayashi and hopped into the driver's seat of his car. I helped Tanaka to his feet, then we both slid into the back seat.
おい、何のつもりだ？それは私の車だぞ。
Ignoring him, Mari started the engine and drove away. Pain and exhaustion swept through my body. I wanted nothing more than to fall asleep in a nice warm bed. I turned to Tanaka.
あなた、本当にかまいたちじゃないんですか？
あんなに違うって言ったのに、誰も私の言うことを聞かないんだから。
He sniffled, fighting back tears.
でもあなたは取引を持ちかけたらそれに乗ったじゃないですか。一人でこんなところに来てるのも変だし、態度も怪しかったし。
Alright, what's the punchline? What's the punchline? Come on, baby, make it a good one.
私はね、旅行雑誌のライターなんだ。一つ星とか 三つ星とかペンションのランク付けをするために客のふりをしてただけなんだ。
How do you pretend to be a guest at a lodge you're actually staying at?
それなのに訴えてやる。こんなペンションは絶対潰してやる。
The more Tanaka talked, the more incensed he became. And he was all but screaming.
じゃあ取引ってのは
金をやるから評価を上げろって意味だと思ったんだよ。そういう連中もよくいるからな。
Mari and I looked at each other and shrugged. Then she started to laugh. I can't believe it. The most suspicious person of all had nothing to do with this, but literally everyone else turned out to be a spy. What kind of foolishness was this? It's all a terrible joke. I'm glad we agree on that much. A terrible, awful, no good, very bad joke. I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me. And then we end listening to smooth... What is it? It's not quite smooth jazz. Is this, like... smooth... It's not quite vaporwave. It's whatever it is, it's aesthetic as hell. But anyway, this route was really bad and I didn't appreciate it. Didn't make any sense whatsoever. Honestly. Anywho. I sure have seen these credits before. Yeah, I'm just skipping ahead to the end. Alright, now we did finish the route, which means we do have to skip a lot of stuff to get back to the end. For 100% completion's sake.
君のためなら死ねる。
You probably will. I didn't care what happened to Japan or the United States or any other country. I didn't care if justice itself was trampled. There was only Mari. Clear to me now that she was the most important thing in the whole world to me, even though we've barely had any chemistry this whole route.
バカね。私のために死んでなんか欲しくないわよ。生き延びるのよ。二人ともね。
Mari gave me a little chuckle, and her eyes seemed to shine with tears. Alright, booby jokes.
もうちょっと下で捕まりなさいよ。
ごめん、わざとじゃないんだ。
Perfectly predictable. I tried to bargain with her.
取引をしないか。
取引？あなたに取引できる材料なんかないじゃない。
What about the gift of friendship? I quickly pulled the pistol from my jacket pocket and held it to Tanaka's head.
こいつを殺すと言ったら。
I said it just like that. I never thought I had it in me. Midori looked skeptical.
殺すですって。
ああ、そうだ。こいつが死んだら、これまでの努力はパーになる。それでもいいのか？
They seemed to be considering whether I was serious or not. Or at least, I hope she was, rather than just considering whether she should shoot us both and be done with it.
わかったわ。あなたに危害は加えない。だからその男をこっちへよこしなさい。さあ、立ち上がらせて。
I hooked my arm around Tanaka and helped him to his feet.
彼を渡せば、本当に助けてくれるんだろうな。
She's definitely not.
ええ、もちろんよ。用があるのはその男だけよ。
I nodded, but didn't believe a word that was coming out of her mouth. I shoved to knock at her, then quickly raised the pistol and took aim. So when we left Kobayashi at the end there, did he, like, freeze to death out in the snow? Because, like, we're not gonna get away with that just because he left us on, you know, a bit of a sour note. Anyway. Look at all that shit. That's another whole route down. I wonder how much... 78%. We did go up about 10 points. Still less than halfway to the ending. That's absolutely wild. How much stuff is in this game anyway? Whatever that is, it's gonna have to be a question for another time. Because we could not possibly keep going after all that. Anyway. What do we want to do now? Ooh, someone's streaming Zero Escape. Interesting. Thank you all for coming. I don't think there's even anyone here left, but we're not showing 0 viewers, so... Yes! I'll have someone raid. We're gonna be raiding Rosette Wolf, who was playing the first Zero Escape. No, she's not. She's playing the second Zero Escape, Virtue's Last Reward. That's a solid game, yup. I'd maybe consider streaming that at some point if it weren't so overdone. Anyway, please treat Rosette as politely as you would treat me. You all know how it is. Don't be a dick. That's good life advice in general. And I will see you all in the future. Goodbye.